to remember the how to call you.
Okay, so it's recording right now.
Okay, so for me it's a pleasure to talk with and to talk with two Albanians about history and the recent history of Albania and Kosovo. The topic is not very well known because honestly the narrative is controlled by the pro-Serbian nationalists. And behind that, I often tell this to the Westerners, behind the Serbs are the Russians and the Russian interests on the Balkans. Interestingly enough, most of the out of Serbosphere, so to say, nationalists like Bulgarian, Croatian, Albanian nationalists agree with me, but most of the Westerners, they just don't get it. So I'm happy to introduce Kadmos. Hello, Kadmos.
Hi.
And Piro.
Hello.
Piro. Hello. So from where to start? Maybe a little bit of introduction of Albanian history. First of all, I must tell some spurgs online because I know that there will be a lot of people spurging. Albanians, from my perspective, I visited Albania in 2019 with my girlfriend and another relative. Albanians are normal European white. I'm underlining that because I heard a lot of bullshit people with a lot of very nice tradition and history. And maybe you'll introduce a little bit about the history and culture, things like that in the future. So, who will start?
Yes, well, I start by presenting ourselves. So my comrade Piro and myself are part of the Albanian third position movement that we can call ATP, like a short term. So what is ATP? ATP is like a spiritual league of Albanian idealists gathered around the values belonging to a perennial tradition to preserve our Albanian and therefore European identity and spirit. I must underline the fact that ATP is not a political party, a political organization, nor an NGO. Instead, ATP can be described as a traditionalist metapolitical movement opposing the subversion of the Albanian spirit, both from the left and from the right, and rejecting every expression of globalism. ATP is also a cultural shock troop whose main philosophic reference is Julius Evola. So each of us members of the ATP are like cultural shock troopers bearing a spiritually pagan, hierarchic, heroic, and aristocratic idea. And thus, we are the incarnation of an anti-humanist, anti-egalitarian, and anti-democratic worldview. And I want to stress the word worldview, because worldviews, can be present and more common in common men's rather than in intellectuals. And so our goal as the Albanian third position is to make Albanians holding this anti-democratic worldview, this traditional worldview, even if they hold this worldview in a confused but intuitive way, we want to make them aware of it. The more we make it fully and clearly emerge in their consciousness, the better for our country and for the European cause as a whole. And we aim at Albanians living in Albania, but also for Albanians living abroad. I can add also that our name, the third position that is in our name, is more than a mere nod to the third position. It's above all the indication of an existing third way beyond Albanian unofficial two-party political system, a third way beyond capitalism and communism, a third way between the main two Abrahamic faiths that you have in Albania, and a third way beyond isolationism and globalization. And these are, important things to underline for Albanians, because, like many people in Europe, they are stuck in this, right versus left, capitalism versus communism, Islam versus Christianity, and so on.
Yeah. So you're coming from a position of preserving the traditional Albanian values, and that you can explain that it's very similar to the rest of the European traditional values.
Yes, if you like, every European tradition is the expression in the temporal realm of metaphysical reality that we call tradition or perennial tradition. And of course, the Albanian tradition is also an expression of this higher tradition that we can call also the Indo-European tradition.
Yeah.
So the Albanian third position, by recognizing this metaphysical reality, we assert it and seek to defend it against all kind of subversions, because to safeguard tradition is to save the Albanian spirit's essence. And this is very important. We are not, fighting for preserving some contingencies, but we are fighting to preserve the essence of our tradition.
So basically, it is not like I'm sorry that interrupt. It's not like the Serbs are trying to spread this disinformation that Albanians are some kind of bridge. I would say some kind of allies of the Turks on the Balkans. You're just trying to protect your own tradition that are totally European and coming from the Illyrians, from what I've known.
Absolutely.
Mm.
So, to set the things right, we must acknowledge these unchanging traditional metaphysical norms and values. We must promote them, defend them, recognize them as a polar star to make the Albanian spirit flourish anew. Because, after years of communism and now of capitalism, the Albanian spirit is under siege. And like I said, the Albanians are very, very connected to this tradition of them. So even if communism tried to destroy it, and now capitalism had this rotting action on it, it's still more or less present. So we have still a chance to reactivate it. So basically, this is the ATP goal.
Yeah, we see it as our duty to carry on our legacy of our ancestors and like to preserve our traditions.
I saw some of the traditions of Albania that are set for a very short period of time, but it's very nice, how to say, very rich tradition, some kind of closer to some Bulgarian tradition. Maybe this is stretching thousands of years back in the time. And as a whole, the people were very nice and welcoming, and yeah, it's very, and not to mention that Albania is totally under, how to say, it's not overlooked. Yeah, thank you. As the beauty, especially of these beaches and the mountains, it's really striking. So yeah, it's actually like a little gem, honestly, on the Balkans. So I was impressed So maybe we'll start like a little bit of introduction of Albanian history, like a short version. Maybe in the future we'll make a whole podcast for the more ancient stuff, because you can say a lot of things, I suppose. So
Well, my idea was to like really focus on the history of Kosovo from the Albanian perspective, but
yeah.
because of how to say it, because of the fact that Kosovo was separated from Albania for all those years. When we talk about the history of Kosovo from the Albanian perspective, we will tackle topics that are related to the history of Albania as a whole. So don't worry, we will cover like both of them little by little. What we can add just to close the topic about the Albanian third position is that we do not accept anybody. We only want to call Albanians to organize themselves, because the actual situation is more dangerous than ever, because individualism and other corrosive democratic influences have turned the Albanians away from their traditions, their identity, and so on. So we want to really make this worldview where the Albanian tradition is at the center and everything revolves around it. The key point for every Albanian which want to fight for his country, because if they want to protect their country, but in a MAGA style, like in civic nationalist style, this won't work absolutely. So that's why we have many books published in PDF format in our blog, that is Albanian Third Position.wordpress. We have also some of them in our Telegram channel, so it's Albanian Third Position. Our books and our articles are published on a regular basis, so you can just check them. We have many topics, and our goal by writing down all this stuff is to make like a kind of doctrine emerge for the Albanian nationalists, because they are stuck in like a 20th century point of view, a 20th century nationalism, if not a 19th century nationalism. And this is really out of date with the present situation, and it has no answer for the problems of today. So we would like to present to our readers or the people listening to us for the first time that our basic doctrine was exposed in our book called The National Shield, that you can find on our blog Albanian Third Position.wordpress, or on our Telegram channel, because we were present also in Instagram, but we were censored like 2 days ago or something like this. So
yeah,
I wanted just to make sure to mention all this, because
so the Serbian Spurks attacked you on Instagram, which is not very surprising. Yeah.
I don't know who did this, but anyway, we are a main target.
I mean,
sorry?
Yeah, no, I said we're still going on, basically. Even if they like continuously try to shut us down, we will still go on and promote our ideals. And what my friend was saying, and I would like to stress that out, is that the Albanian Third Position is obviously not for everyone. It's some kind of like you have to feel it. You have to have like a synchronization both spiritually and physically to be able to come to the conclusion that you have to fight for your country, for your race, and for your traditions. So yeah.
This is true in the spirit of Skanderbeg, by the way.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Absolutely. That's why we also have Skanderbeg as our main hero and inspiration. And we
And by the way, one of our books like includes the traditionalist explanation of the figure of Skanderbeg. So basically,
By the way, the Serbs are trying even to steal Skanderbeg, which is kind of ridiculous.
yeah, it is.
Anyway, the spiritual, I don't know what to say, parasites, like their relatives in the Middle East. But anyway, let's continue.
So let's move on. So to
By the way,
Kosovo.
I will post links. I suppose you will provide the links from your sites and the Telegram.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and also I'll be interested in reading some of your books if you have something in English. So,
Yeah,
yes,
we
in
try
fact,
to.
all
Go on.
all of our productions are in Albanian and in English.
okay.
Just for the purpose that even like non-Albanian readers could read our like ideology and
because we have also this mission to answer to the unlimited propaganda done by the Serbians online. For many years, they had no, there was only the Serbian point of view and nothing. So for the first time, and for the first time in English, Albanians are answering to the Serbian propaganda.
Yeah, so we're offering like a different perspective of like the Albanian worldview on how things were and are.
And we want to thank you, Nordlux, for inviting us, because this is as far as I know, this is the first time Albanians speaking about their side of the story of Kosovo.
I can tell. I told you in the initial talk why I'm doing that. First of all, I think it's fair. Second of all, I think that against Europe, against Bulgaria currently, it's a great threat of racial replacement. And one of the main proponents of these are the hidden Judeo or Judeo-Bolshevik powers of Moscow. And they're using the Serbs as a foot soldiers on the Balkans, like a traditional allies. And most of the people don't understand that, for example, another enemy that supposedly the Russians and the Serbs are fighting, like Orthodox defenders of Europe, but the Russians are allied with the Turks. So my position was that Bulgarian nationalists, Albanian and Croatian nationalists must help each other, because what is coming is something that we cannot prophesize what is the future, but we need to stand our ground. And my suspicion is that the Serbs in the nearest future will start to provoke the Albanians in Kosovo, which I've observed something in the present days.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you. Basically, they're continuously doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's about time something like will happen. But I mean, it kind of depends if you think about it like thoroughly. The thing is that we all know that's like a supreme rule in the world that's like influencing all like all the globe, which we call like the globalism. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that there are no real like states today. So yeah, basically all is controlled by we know who.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, on my channel, there is no censorship. If you're not going to upload somewhere in the more legal channel, you can call the Jews like a Jews. I mean, I mean, this is what what I use. If I have a friend, a brother from Croatia, Baresic, which is uploading on YouTube, and then I'm not using some kind of the chosen tribe or whatever, the parasites or whatever, and then he's supporting YouTube just to prevent his channel from banning. But on my channel, you can use you can name the enemies of Europe with their real names. So go on. Maybe Piro must explain the situation in Kosovo. How many are the Albanians in Kosovo? Some historical background. What is the present situation? What happened?
Yeah, actually, we were trying like to think of this chronologically. So my friend Cadmius would try to describe like a background of ancient times, like Dardania and Illyria, and then I'd go on and try to explain the current situation and focus a little bit on the Kosovo War and the Kosovo in the Yugoslavia, basically. So he'll start first.
Yes, thank you. Well, we were speaking that how today's states are like empty shells, and this is the case, in fact, with Kosovo. We, as I told you before, people in Kosovo prefer being independent rather than being called citizens of Serbia. So, to a degree, this situation is for them a good situation because they can express their real identity, but there is still a problem. This Kosovo identity misses something, and what it misses is, in fact, a union with Albania, because Kosovo, as an independent state, has no reason, no roots, nothing. Kosovo must be reunited with Albania, and by saying this, many people will maybe think why Kosovo is so important for Albania. Well, first, I would like to stress that Kosovo is, in fact, a Serbian word. In fact, the region, the province of Kosovo, is called in Serbian, I think it's called Kosovo I Metohija. Metohija, something like this. So
Metohija, yeah.
Metohija.
Yeah.
So it means Kosovo means the field of the crows, I think.
Yeah, field of ravens, crows. Yeah, the
Mhm.
blackbird
Ravens,
field. Yeah,
blackbirds, yes, the field of blackbirds, and Metohija is like the land of the churches.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but in Albanian, Metohija is called Ravshi Dugajini, which means the valley of the Dugajin. The Dugajin are highlands in Albania, and their name is a reference to an ancient medieval aristocratic family that defended Albania against the Turks. Their main, the most well-known
figure is Lake
figure,
Dugajini.
yes, it's Lake Dugajini, and he gave to the Albanian people their code of honor called canon. It's like it's a code of honor, but also a gathering of laws that help the Albanian to keep their identity, or the 5 centuries of Ottoman occupation. And the other part of Kosovo, so the field of the blackbirds, Albanians call it Dardania. And Dardania is a reference to an ancient kingdom from the Illyrian times. And this ancient kingdom was called Dardania. And the Dardenians were an ancient tribe, part of Illyrians, or maybe a little bit more independent from them. It depends on authors. And they are really important because some scholars, like Sir Noel Malcolm, argue that the Albanian language descends from the language spoken by those Dardenians, by the Dardenian tribe of Illyria, or by the Dardanian kingdom. So it is very possible that the Proto-Albanian comes from this place around Kosovo, Montenegro, and the Albanian highlands of Dugajin. So if this is true, it makes our modern-day Kosovo, or the region of Dardania, the cradle of the Albanian language. And this, if this is the cradle of the Albanian language, then Kosovo is like very, very important for the Albanians. And that's why we ask for the union between Kosovo and Albania. Just to say some word on the ancient kingdom of Dardania. So it was an ancient kingdom, more or less in modern-day Kosovo. This kingdom peaked with King Bardulis, which vanquished Macedonia and Epirus between 393 358 BC. So it was a very powerful kingdom at this time. And because I just mentioned the king Bardulis, even in the Bardulis name, we can perhaps find an Albanian etymology referring to Bard being the Albanian word for white, Bard, and Ulis can be Ul, which means star in Albanian. So this guy name means white star.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, Old Bulgarian Alp is also white. So yeah, there is some connection there. Yeah. Because Alp is white. I know that this is from Illyrian, most likely. And Alp in Old Bulgarian is white. So go on. I'm sorry that interruption.
No problem.
Very interesting. My host in Albania was called Dardan. It's quite very great guy, by the way, if he's listening, because I know that he has some nationalistic ideas. Great guy. I'll come at the first occasion again. So anyway,
no, you just gave the perfect transition, because Dardan, of course, comes from Dardania, and in Albanian, the etymology of Dardania is linked to the word darva, which means pear. Like a pear tree. And so we have the name of a kingdom and the name of a king that are very, very related to the Albanian language. So once again, I want to stress out that the kingdom of Dardania and the region of Dardania are therefore very important for our Albanian identity. But I must go even further, because this region of Dardania is not only important for Albanians, but also for Europeans as a whole, because Dardenians, you find them also in the Iliad of Homer, of classical Greek. And from the Iliad, you know that the world Western European civilization has its roots in this work by Homer. And many people thought at first that the Dardenians mentioned in the Iliad are simply Trojans. But this is a mistake, because Dardenians were real people living in the area where the city of Troy was located, so in modern day Turkey. And there is some scholars that believe that the Dardenians from Anatolia, from this part of Turkey, were in fact related to the Dardenians we are speaking of the Dardenians from Illyria. So this is
interesting, because what is the connection between Illyrians and Thracians? It's also interesting.
Yes, there are other scholars that believe that there is a connection between Illyria and Thracians, and many believe that those making the connection were the Dardenians.
Because from what I found was that there was two opposing groups of Indo-Europeans from the two sides, and the Thracians and Dardenians actually are white against the Achaeans, against the Greeks, and also on the side of the Trojans, there was also Thracians, Illyrians, and Scythians. That's why I was asking before about this Iranian or Aryan element that is also not very unknown. When I say Aryan, this is also not accurate, because Illyrians, Thracians, they are also from this Aryan stock. So yeah, this is another thing that maybe in the future we'll talk about, but maybe we must concentrate on the history of the recent history of Kosovo. Yeah.
Well, this is just to give a context, because because of the Serbian propaganda, people believe that the Albanians in Kosovo are not autochthonous. But by doing this little bit of historical context, we found that this is not the case.
By the way, another group of people that is interesting to me, and we can see the descendants of these people all around the Balkans, especially Central and Southern Balkans. What do you know about Pelasgians?
Well, the Pelasgians were like the original inhabitants of the Balkan Peninsula. But for me, they are like pre-Indo-European, so I don't think they're that much related to us.
Basically the Pelasgians, as far as we know, they were like the ancient hunter-gatherers. They were already settled in Europe, but Indo-Europeans, which came from the Caucasus region, they invaded these people. So we don't think like there's much relation to the Pelasgians with the Illyrians. Basically, what we know is that the Illyrians, as like the Proto-Illyrians, so the actual Proto-Indo-European version of the Illyrians, invaded the Pelasgians. Basically, we may share like half of our ancestry with both, since basically the Illyrians settled where Pelasgians were, but not that Pelasgians were like the ancestors of Illyrians themselves. Do you get it?
Because there was a theory, there are a lot of researchers of this thing, that the people now this is a theory, they cannot prove it exactly, but E1, B1 haplogroup, they trace it back to the Pelasgians. There's some researchers that claim so.
Yeah, probably, but Pelasgians themselves, they don't have like any relation to the actual Indo-European culture that Illyrians brought. So yeah, that's it basically.
Yeah.
So at best, the Illyrians conquered the Pelasgians, and the Pelasgians must have been like, the lowest caste,
Yeah,
the lowest caste, in the lowest hierarchical order. So, big deal.
Yeah, I see. Because the lot of researchers that looking at this stuff,
yeah.
but
Basically, sorry to interrupt you.
yeah.
What we're trying to say is that the Illyrians like imposed their culture to the Pelasgians because they showed themselves superior, and that's like the rule of nature. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You're right. You're totally right.
yeah,
There's these pre-Aryan or pre-Indo-European
yeah.
cultures. They were quite all ancient and they were well developed, but they definitely were lacking the warrior spirit of the Aryans.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, as far as we know, Pelagians were like more like matriarchal, so
Yeah.
more like women-centered,
Yeah.
and the Indo-Europeans, like in general, were more like man-centered, and
Yeah.
that's what like made them achieve what they achieved, basically.
That's why, because I look a little bit because I'm pagan and I'm interested in this ancient.
Yeah.
That's why there was a sky thunder god, for like a chief deity for the Illyrians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we have, I mean, like my friend can talk about paganism because it's kind of his field, but yeah.
Yes, basically, this is the spiritual distinction between Pelasgians and Illyrians. So, you find this spiritual distinction like everywhere in Europe. It doesn't mean that they were Pelasgians everywhere in Europe, but they were like their cousins. Like I think in Italy, they were Ligures. I don't know how to say
Yeah.
this in English.
Ligurians, I believe. Yeah.
Ligurians,
Yeah.
yes. And I think, I believe that some of the last remnants of this ancient pre-Indo-European population in Europe, you can find them in, this part of Spain and France, where you have the Basque people,
Mhm.
and they have a system which is very matriarchal. They have a way to number, which betrays a matriarchal system, and you have some clues here and there that those that can be related to Pelasgians on the European continent may be perhaps the Basque people rather than the Albanians. Although in some parts of Albania, because in Albanian you have many dialects, local dialects and traditions, you can find some traces of a matriarchal system, of a matriarchal point of view. So there is a possibility that a part of the Albanian population comes from the ancient Pelasgians, but this will not be the aristocratic part of the Albanian people.
Yeah.
So,
This is just the subjugated. Because this is my observation. This is there are certain types of people in the different contrary to whatever the northwestern Europeans thinking of the Balkans. I believe that because of the specific patriarchal system of the Balkans, Balkan people actually managed to preserve, or at least most of the Balkan people managed to preserve their culture. And contrary to these Abrahamical religions, actually this is very one of the very few honest Orthodox priests in Bulgaria recently admitted that all these pagan traditions, folk costumes, songs, dances, everything is pagan. and basically they were the thing that were preserving Bulgaria. It's not the Orthodoxy, not Christianity, actually.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
that's why I was.
That's true. Even though it looks ironic, but that's definitely true.
Yeah. This is the thing. And meanwhile, in Western Europe, especially in these more Protestant parts of Europe, you have these kind of stale. They removed these pagan elements. They had this stale religion that is decaying basically, and this is the product of especially these parts. They created this modern capitalism that is serving the parasites, and this is the difference. From my understanding, that the Balkans is one of the last nests of the true pagan tradition, but you must remove the, let's say, the Abrahamic I would say surface of the traditions, like this Christianity in different forms or Islam or whatever, and you can see the true pagan traditions that were going back to the ancient past. So yeah.
Yeah, so back to the Dardenians. So the Dardenians, their name comes from a character named Dardanus, and he's like the mythical ancestor for the Dardanian people in Western Anatolia. And many traditions have this Dardanus coming from the Balkans. Some scholars, as I said, believe that he came from the Balkans and from the Illyrian Dardanians. You can check Grace Harriet McCurdy, MACCURDY, a book called Troy and Paeonia, or there is an article for free, you can read it online, called The Wanderings of Dardanus. So this Dardanus guy was the son of Zeus and the Pleiad Electra, and even though traditions do not agree on his place of origin, some say he was from Italy, some from Arcadia in Greece, some from Samothrace, which is an island between Thrace and Anatolia. And so Grace Harriet McCurdy believes that he was from the Dardanian tribe of Illyria. And this Dardanus character founded the city of Dardania or Dardanium, depends on the source you're reading, at the foot of the Mount Ida in the region of Troy, of the future city of Troy that will be founded by his descendants. So from this myth, maybe what we can grasp from the historicity of this myth is that the Dardanians were not a people, an Anatolian Indo-European people, like for example the ancient people called Luwians in Anatolia, but the Dardanians of Anatolia come from the Balkans, so they are Balkanic Indo-Europeans. And while sparse, the relation between the Balkan Dardanians and those of the Iliad has been guessed about since antiquity. Indeed, you have Pliny, the ancient author, Pliny the Elder, which had a good insight. He said, like, there are authors, I'm quoting him, there are authors who say the Moisi, the Brigi, and the Fini crossed over from Europe, and that from them are descended the people called the Mysi, Phrygian, and Bithyni, unquote. So maybe he had an echo of an ancient tradition of the migration from the Balkans to the Anatolian part, which would later become Troy and would be associated with the Trojan War and the Iliad. And from the Iliad, you have the Aeneid, the wanderings of Aeneas, the forefather of Rome. And this is very interesting because you have some Dardenians tribes that moved to Italy, and they were later known as Messapians. And between Messapian and Albanian, you find some words that are really similar. So there seems to be a link between ancient Messapian language and Albanian. And when you take the name of this tribe, the tribe that moved to Italy was called the Calabrians, which gave the name of the later Italian region of Calabria. And those Dardenians, a tribe in Dardania, was called Galabrians with a J. And between Albania, Italy, Dardania, and even ancient Epirus, you have all toponyms that refer to one another, and this is the a further proof, if you want, of a migration that happened between these places. And it's very possible that the Aeneas myth probably entered the Roman world via Messapians and via these Dardenian tribes that established themselves in the Italian peninsula. So, to say like, oh, Kosovo, it's Serbian and it's only the medieval period for it's only associated with the medieval Serbia. It's really not doing justice to the ancient kingdom of Dardania and to its potential importance for the European civilization as a whole, because the Dardenians were a real Indo-European people that existed, and they are attested outside of the Iliad and earlier than it. We have some mentions of them in Egyptian sources, which mentions that they were allied with the Hittites, the ancient empire of the Hittites.
Yeah. The Anatolian Indo-Europeans.
Yes. So, by overlooking this ancient history because of Serbian propaganda is not doing justice to the European civilization as a whole, because you are not investigating about the case of the Dardenians, about their possible relationships with the Illyrians, the Thracians, the ancient Italians, and so on. And so it's very, for me, from a point of view, it's a very shameful attitude.
So, I think that it was established in the linguistic science that Albanian actually is derived from Illyrian, from what I've known at least. They also mentioned that there were some borrowed words from ancient Greek and maybe Roman because of the interactions between the Illyrians and the Romans and the ancient Greeks. Any ideas on that?
Well, in fact, the most recent linguists that are studying Albanian believe that Albania might come from a language that was between Illyrian and Thracian. So this puts the Dardenians in a very good position to be the ancestor of the Albanian language. But then the question will be like, who brought the Albanian language to Albania and when? Or was it a small group of elites that conquered locals and assimilated them linguistically, or a mass migration of Proto-Albanian speakers. And this, it's for historians and linguists to find out. But I believe that the Dardenians are at the center of this ancient Albanian identity. And so this is why Kosovo and the Dardenian region is important for us as Albanian nationalists. In fact, Dardenia or Kosovo can turn to be not the cradle of Serbia, but the cradle of Proto-Albania.
By the way, do you have explanation? This is a little bit out of the topic. Do you have explanation about the origin of the Serbs? Because we tried to touch that with our Croatian brother, Croatian war master, but there are different theories about them. We know for sure that in the early medieval texts they are not a very significant force. Like they had the Serbian propaganda had these illusions of grandeur, like the whole Eastern Europe coming from Serbia. That they were there in 19th century. The Greater Serbia idea started to see Serbs basically next to the Black Sea, even in Ukraine. So they were spreading these. I sorry for these kind of deviation from the topic, but to just for the listeners, they are spreading these from these pan-Slavic groups, and that were established with the great help of the Russian Empire, and they were established by Freemasons. So this is another thing to take in mind, that the Serbian propaganda is it's new thing. They didn't know about their history. They're trying to convince Croatians, Bulgarians, Albanians, Bosniaks, and Macedonians, whatever the Macedonians. Basically, they had success with Macedonians almost. That they are some kind of Serbs, and that actually all Slavs, whatever Slovenia, were Serbs in the past, which is total bullshit. But anyway, continue.
So just to sum up this part, so the Dardenians may very well be the ancient ancestors of the Albanian and of the Albanian language, and they are very important people for our European identity, because this ethnic group called the Dardenians became so entangled in European mythology and legend because of the Trojan War that to reduce them or overlook them as merely Trojans is not doing justice to them. You have this state out in the Iliad that the Dardenians and the Trojans are not the same people, and this is like a further clue that the Dardenians came from Europe. They were Indo-Europeans from Europe, from the Balkans, and highlighting this fact will not only help uncover rather unknown part of the Albanian history, but also of the European identity. But you provided me a good transition to speak a little bit about the Middle Ages, because the ancient history of Dardenia is completely hidden by this Serbian propaganda about the Middle Ages, about the Serbian state in the Middle Ages, and so on. So I would like to recall some elements here. If you want, the Slavs came in the Balkans around the 6th century, if I'm not mistaken. 6th, 7th century.
7th century, but it's also very questionable, the thing with the Slavs. Basically, the term is not coined in the old Church Slavonic, which is Old Bulgarian. They're using the term Sloven, and the term Sloven basically means literate or people of the book, which could refer to Christians, also could refer to speakers of the same language. So basically, and also it's very questionable, the whole thing with the whole invasion, but let's say that there was a certain elements that came from Central Europe and from Eastern Europe, like Eastern Europe from the present day Ukraine. And these elements that came from Ukraine came from Bulgaria, with the Bulgarians, basically. And what are the origin of these people is also very questionable. As I said before, there are a lot of sources that claim, Byzantium sources, that claim some of the tribes having actually Scythian or even Ostgothic descent. But anyway, let's stick to the traditional Slavic theory, like Central Europe is 7th century, early 7th century, if I remember correctly.
Yes, because I don't really have a point of view about the origin of the Serbs. In good faith, I believe when they say that they came with the Slavic migration, that they created
I can tell you interesting theory. So basically, there was a Bulgarian historian Ganchu Tsenov that, of course, his books were banned during time of communism. He was educated in Germany, and he had a quite interesting. He knew something like, I believe, 8 or 9 ancient languages, like including Old Church Slavonic or Old Bulgarian, Hebrew, Latin, and many more, actually, and German, of course, like medieval form of German. And he analyzed the different documents, and he was suggesting a common origin of Bulgarians and Croats, which with the Scythian or Albanic element and the Ostrogothic element also. And he also mentioned about Albanians' Illyrian origin. So this is according to his looking into the Byzantium sources. So this is another theory that this is another proof of the Albanian ethnic origin. He was quite a lot of things, and a lot of things are lost because he basically he lived in Germany during the Second World War, and his books were banned in Bulgaria, even burnt. So maybe if I manage to find some of the books could be interesting also for the Albanian listeners, like this Bulgarian historian, what he was writing about the ancient origin of the Albanians. But anyway, they're just a historical reference. As I like history, so I'm making references. Is my thing. Yeah, go on.
And so the Serbians underlined how their state was a very powerful one in the Middle Ages, and okay, nobody will deny this, I guess. But the thing is, if I remember correctly, their state was formed early, rather in the region they called Rashia.
Rashka.
Yeah. Instead of the region they called Kosovo. So if there is a cradle of the Serbs, I guess it's more Rashia, Raska than Kosovo.
Yeah.
But I would like to also quote Noel Malcolm in his book Kosovo: A Short History, because he highlights something interesting about this.
I will interact a little bit about the Serbs. Serbs were never really powerful in the early Middle Ages. They were actually wiped out by the First Bulgarian Empire, and we commented that with our Croatian brothers. The Croats saved the Serbs. We're talking about 9th century, 10th century. They were totally dominated by the Bulgarian Empire. And the rise of the Serbia is late medieval period, where these wars between the Byzantium, First Bulgarian Empire, and the Hungarians, which Hungarians are quite powerful factor in the North Balkans, actually created a power vacuum, and the Serbs started to use this power vacuum and to gain more power. And they actually became empire for a very short tsardom, like Tsar is emperor. They copied the title of the Bulgarian Tsar, Bulgarian emperor. By the way, they managed to do that with intermarrying in the Bulgarian nobility. So that's why they started to claim territory of what is now Western, so basically Eastern Serbia and Macedonia. They claim it through intermarriages and through some typical Serbian tricks. They like to build monasteries and to use the monasteries as a proof that this is the ancient Serbian land, which is total bullshit, of course. The nobility used to build monasteries just to establish their what is the term, so-called legitimate claims to the land and to the people of the land. But anyway, just
Yeah, well, so just to quote Noel Malcolm, I quote, he says, medieval Kosovo is often referred to in general terms as the cradle of the Serbs, as if it had been a Serb heartland from the outset. But the reality was rather different. Just over 800 years separate the arrival of the Serbs in the Balkans in the 7th century from the final Ottoman conquest in the 1450s. Out of these 8 centuries, Kosovo was Serb ruled for only the last 2.5, less than 1/3 of the entire period. Bulgarian khans and Tsars held Kosovo from the 850s until the early 11th century, then Byzantine emperors until the final decades of the 12th century. So how could this region that was held by Serbians for such a short amount of time, if we have a wider vision of the medieval era, be the cradle of the Serbs? And when you ask this to Serbs, they often brought two elements: the churches, like you mentioned, and the Battle of Kosovo Polje in 389.
The most famous Serbian battle, of course, was battle.
Yeah. So I want to focus a little bit on this battle, and I want to say that indeed the Serbians fought the Turks in Kosovo, in the Kosovo Polje, but what they tend to forget is that, or they don't mention it at all, it's that they were not alone in this battle. In fact, they were Valakians, Bulgarians, and Albanians fighting with them.
But there was a Bulgarian and Albanian cavalry that were fighting.
Absolutely. There was from Albania, from the city of Shkodra, there were like 5,000 warriors led by Judge Balsha from the Balsha family in the northern Albania. And we can mention also the presence of the head of the Muzaka family, Theodore II of the Muzaka family. And some sources mention also
He actually died in the battle. Theodore
yes,
II Muzakai, which was an Albanian noble and prince actually. So that's an important evidence.
yeah. So
From what I know, these cavalry units basically gave the hell to the Turks. That's why actually the Turks suffered heavy casualties, even though basically, of course, they had enormous amount of troops for the period. They managed to win the fight, but from what I've known, the heavy cavalry of the Albanians actually fought very bravely in that battle. So
yeah, in fact, everybody did on this battle because it was like a pan-Balkanic union against the Turks,
yes,
and after this battle, this battle was, if you like, this battle was the final defeat of the Serbian resistance in face of the Ottoman Empire. After that, you will only have like a collaboration between these two entities.
Yeah. The Moravian Serbs basically were very happy to join the Turks and to fight for them. In numerous occasions, they saved the Turks, and including in the Battle of Nicopolis, which were basically the European powers of today, like from all Europe, like from Germany, Bulgaria, Hungary, Croatia, Albania, Wallachia, everyone were fighting, and of course on the other side were the Turks and the Moravian Serbs, which
even the Battle of Constantinople in 1453, basically the Turks were helped by Serbians. So there you go.
Yeah. They also saved. This is also, I think, a Battle of Ankara, where I believe the Mongols of Timurids were basically smashing the Turks. Basically, the Serbian heavy knights saved the asses of the Turks. I mean, they were totally surrendered by the surrounded by the Mongols, but the Serbs managed to help their beloved masters to escape. So, yeah. Anyway, so let's continue. Yeah.
Well, this. In fact, there were 3 battles in Kosovo. There was a prior battle before 1389, and there was another battle after 1389. It was around, if I recall well, 1445 or 1444, something like this. It's called the Second Battle of Kosovo, and this one is overlooked, never mentioned by Serbians online or in any other places, because in this battle you had the Hungarians, which were winning victories after victories against the Turks. They planned to meet the Turks at Kosovo, and they were waiting for the Albanian army to came and to help them against the Turks. But the Albanian army was led by Skanderbeg, our national hero, which was a military genius and which knew very well the tactics of the Turks. So this second battle could have been a turning point in the history of the Balkans. But what happened is that...
By the way, military genius is very soft name for him. He won over 25 battles over the Turks, which were dominant power of these late Middle Ages. I believe 25 battles against the Turks, which is quite an achievement.
Yes, quite an achievement. He was always outnumbered, so...
So I was saying he actually lost 2 because of treason. So basically, he didn't lose any of the battles because of his incapacity.
Yeah, I believe what was the most stunning victory, I believe, is Albulena, right? I mean, the when he managed to wipe out the 2 or 3 times the number of the Albanian force. I mean, the Turks were outnumbering Albanian forces like 2 or 3 times. So
Yeah.
Yes, yes, this is his like first victory, which was a very good start for his resistance against the Ottomans. But unfortunately, this second occasion to beat the Turks once and for all in Kosovo was taken from him because the Serbian despot George Brankovic, he didn't allow his army to cross Serbia and to join with the Hungarians. So Skanderbeg in a revenge move burned some Serb villages and looted their possessions there. And because of this treacherous act against European, we had Ottomans in Albania, in Bulgaria, in Serbia, in the whole Balkans for more or less 500 years.
yeah, true,
I
true. They did the same during the Battle of Nicopolis, by the way. Basically, the Serbian heavy knights there was two major mistakes. So basically, one was the lack of strong centralized command. There was basically it was Crusader army. It was supposedly under the command of the Hungarian emperor king. Sigismund, but basically he and the Teutonic knights and the part of the Bulgarian aristocrats that had experience with fighting the Turks were they had very conservative idea that they must wait until the Turks unleash it. The Turks, of course, and now outnumbered the Crusader forces at least 2-1. And they had the conservative idea, especially the Bulgarian aristocrats had a very conservative idea to wait until the Turks attack the European powers. I believe that the Albanians and the Bulgarians were on the same left flank of that battle. You must look at the you must look at the Battle of Nicopolis. And basically, the French knights didn't listen, and they charge forward. They managed to smash the lightly armored Turkish forces, and then these caused the rest of the Crusader army just to charge forward to help them, because the Turks managed to surround the circle the Crusaders, and Sigismund decided to help them. And in that moment where basically the Crusader army was winning, the Turks even over the best Turkish forces, which is the Yenisari or Yenicheri, the Serbs came and they basically attacked the backs of the Crusader army. So, yeah.
Yes. So long for this shield of Christianity, of the kebab removers since Middle Ages or whatever.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So.
Okay. Let's return to the Battle of Kosovo in 1389, because what makes this battle so interesting is all the traditions surrounding it, and especially two elements. The first element is the famous myth about Prince Lazar having a dream in which I think it's an angel that came and proposed to him either terrestrial riches and domination, or spiritual riches and domination. I think it's like this. Like, do you prefer temporal power or spiritual power? Do you prefer winning a kingdom in earth or winning the kingdom of heaven? and Prince Lazar chose the heavens, and that's why the Serbs lost the battle. But Prince Lazar went in heaven, and so on and so forth. So myths around battles, around historical figures are interesting. They have always a kind of esoteric core and esoteric meaning. But I won't focus on the meaning behind this myth of the Kosovo Poli battle. But what is interesting to note, this is rather funny point, because if Prince Lazar was a pagan, if the angel had proposed him, do you prefer the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom in the earth? His answer would have been something like, for me as a pagan, the two are the same. Because in paganism you cannot distinguish, and you should not distinguish, the temporal realm with the spiritual one. They are connected. They're always connected. They're not separated like in Abrahamic faiths.
Yes.
Such as Orthodoxy, Christian Orthodoxy, for example. So, if a pagan Prince Lazar chose the temporal spiritual realm, the outcome would have been, in both cases, a victory over the Turks, because behind each military victory there is a spiritual force in action. And in our book about the traditional interpretation of Kanderbeg, we underline that him winning all these battles throughout his life means something on the spiritual realm. This is what the ancient Romans called the imperium. When a Roman general won a battle, it was like the confirmation on the temporal plane of a spiritual force acting through the general. And this is why in Roman triumph, the general would be dressed in red, would hold a crown referring to the elements associated with the king of the gods, Jupiter, Zeus. And all the victories of the Roman general would be dedicated to the higher god, because the general would have been like an avatar, or just a tool in the hand of the god to win the battle. So this myth works. This myth of the Prince Lazar and the angel works in a Christian context, but if we look at it in a pagan context, it has not really any meaning, because this distinction between temporal plane and spiritual plane is not very logical for a pagan point of view. But anyway, so this is the first thing why this battle is well known. And the second,
this is very typical, by the way. This is, by the way, excuse first of all of the Serbs and their lost battle, right? And second of all, Serbs are always playing like these really very Christian, Orthodox, very believing people and things like that. But in reality, it's not like that. If you look at the other battles, there was a battle of Velbush, where there was a Bulgarian Tsar, basically. This king, I believe at that point, he was still a king, a Serbian king, not a Tsar. He basically tricked the Bulgarian Tsar by the two opposing forces decided to have armistice before the battle for a day, and they swear on the Bible. like that there will be an armistice. But the Serbs actually were waiting for their heavily armored Catalonian, I believe, Catalan mercenaries. And when they came, they basically attacked the Bulgarian army without honoring the armistice. And so these supposedly sacred oath on the Bible or the Abrahamic book basically doesn't mean anything for them. So they have a bunch of excuses for these for the whole thing. So in one way, they suggest that they're these Orthodox Christians and defenders of faith, but on the other hand, it doesn't matter. They're just using them for their political narrative. So yeah.
Yeah, we can even mention you have a lot of legends about the Prince Marco.
Yeah.
Maybe you are aware of that. And
yeah.
In the legends, he's a noble prince and fighting the Turks. And I think even you have some Albanians, which are the villains in his legend. But the reality is that this Prince Marco was rather collaborating with the Turks.
Yes,
and
true.
And the Albanians were, facing him because they were enemies of the Turks. So you have this like of dichotomy between the historical reality and what Serbs told in myths. But once again, I want to stress that myths have their own meaning. So it's not always when you have a myth, it's not always something hiding the historical truth. It can refer to it, but myths have their own meaning. And in the case of Prince Marco, if I recall well, there are like elements that tend to point that there is a story about reincarnation and etc. So maybe the authors of the legends of the myth used historical figures to pass down some doctrines, some ancient pagan doctrines among the people. But this is another topic, maybe for some other time.
Yeah.
But since we are talking about myths and Prince Marco, we must also mention about the Battle of Kosovo Polje, the case of Milos Obilic, or should I say Miroš Kopili. Because, the Battle of Kosovo Polje didn't survive only in Serbian epics and Serbian poems and Serbian rhapsodic epics, but also in Albanian rhapsodic songs. And it's been documented across Albanian lands by national and international scholars such as Albert Lod or Margaret Hasluk, that the Albanian presence in the Battle of Kosovo led to a memory of this battle among Albanian poets. And I would like to quote from a book called Kosovo, The Battle of Kosovo, an Albanian epic. It says that, so I quote, in books by local historians, the author is here referring to local Albanian historians from the Kosovo province. I continue the quote. I read that Milos Obilic, the Serbian hero reputed to be the assassin of the Sultan, was instead the Albanian hero Miloš Kopilic. Evidence of his Albanian origin was to be found in the epic song of the battle and in folk wisdom, which locates Miloš's birth in Kopilic, a hamlet in the rural area of Drenica. In Kosovo, current popular history texts, but also school textbooks, have absorbed the oral tradition. the possibility of an Albanian copylage will come as a complete shock to a wider audience that admires Serbian epic poetry and knows the Serbian hero Obilic. In truth, no historical evidence confirms Kopilic's Albanian origin, but no evidence confirms Obilic's Serbian origin either. The name Obilic, for example, is an 18th century invention that two Serbian amateur but influential nationalist historians, Vasilije Petrović and Pavle Julinac, introduced. Iron quote. So, there is this character, this figure, Milos Obilic, and the Serbs say he was a Serbian knight that managed to go beyond the Turkish lines in the Battle of Kosovo to meet the Sultan and to kill him in battle. And it's true that the Sultan died during the Battle of Kosovo. But here is a problem, because if you like, how can a Serbian knight go beyond the lines of the Turkish army, go in the Turkish camp, find the place where is the Sultan, and manage to be close enough to the Sultan to kill him? And one theory can be that this Miloš Obilic, if he was welcomed in the Turkish camp, if he was welcomed by the Sultan during the battle, it means that he must have been welcomed even before the battle. So maybe this Miloš Obilic was close to the Sultan, was collaborating with the Turkish forces. And this could explain why Miloš Obilic was able to go beyond the lines so easily, because I guess that the Sultan had some wards and was like far from the battle and so on. So it was not an easy thing to do. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I see your logic, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Makes sense. Also, there was this quote from the Turkish Sultan that he suggests that the Serbs made the conquest of the Balkans possible, or something in those lines.
Yeah, so these are the two mythical elements about the Battle of Kosovo Polje, the myth of Prince Lazar and the legend of Miloš Obilic. So two possibilities for Miloš Obilic. Either he was a Serbian knight that was collaborating with the Turks and that at the last moment managed to be close enough to Sultan to kill him, or, as the Albanian tradition has it, he was an Albanian knight that was close enough to the Sultan and that killed him because I think in the Albanian version of the song, he meets the Sultan after the battle, like to salute him because the Sultan had won victory, and he is outraged by the way the Sultan wants to treat the Albanian people, and then he kills him out of pride. Anyway, with the Battle of Kosovo Polje, I want to underline the fact that not only the Serbian did not oppose that much to the Ottoman Empire, and that they didn't wear the kebab removers or shield of Christianity in Europe that they like to to pretend they were. Because if you take a Turkish dictionary of the names of the countries of Europe, you will find that they have two ways to name countries. There is a way to name the countries they conquered, and a way to name the countries they didn't manage to conquer. And this tells a lot, because Serbia is called Serbistan, just like Bulgaria is called Bulgaristan, because Turks managed to conquer rather quickly Bulgaria and Serbia. But on the other hand, they call Albania not Albanistan or Arnavutistan, because they didn't conquer, or they had really, really big troubles conquering Albania. Instead, they call Albania Arnavutluk. And likewise, Romania was defended by Vlad Tepes, and they don't call Romania Romanistan, but they call it Romania. So you have straight from the horse's mouth who fought the Turks, who defended Europe, and who was conquered rather easily.
So your suggestion is that. So by the way, if you go through the Serbian history even later, like in 18th, 19th century, you can see these interesting. I mean, I don't say that they don't resist the Turks or things like that, but they were using the Turks very often to open, so to say, space for their own interests. For example, there was uprisings that Bulgarians supported, well, Serbian uprisings that Bulgarians supported. And at the end, the Serbs had the habit to betray Bulgarians to the Turks, just to late the Serbs to claim these territories that were free, that were basically Bulgarian population were massacred, and the Serbs then later claimed these territories as their own, like not only their own, historically the Serbian territories. So this is the thing with these people, that they have this mentality, so to say. So going to a present day Kosovo, maybe.
Well, I can mention, because this is the part of history that Serbs say. This is why Kosovo is important for Serbs, because it's the cradle of Serbia, but it's also the place where we had this battle and this stuff. But when you study it a little bit more, you see that, okay, there was a battle, but there were other battles. There were Albanians fighting with the Serbs. There is all these controversies around Milos Kopili. So the Kosovo being, the region of Kosovo being tied to Serbian identity, because of these elements, doesn't add up. Because if you take out of the big picture the Albanian fighting, the Bulgarian fighting with the army of Tsar Lazar, you are hiding a very important part of the picture, and you don't understand why Albanians are autochthonous to Dardenia, to Kosovo, to the Kosovo region. And we were talking about the churches just before, and this is another argument for the Serbs to say, no, the Kosovo region is ours because of the churches. But when you look at the toponyms of these churches, you find a lot of Albanian-related names, like Sveti Dinova, Sveti Arbanash, and so on and so on. And these kind of toponyms are like underline a kind of Albanian presence before the coming of the Ottoman army. Because one of the arguments of the Serbs to say Albanians are not autochthonous to Kosovo is to say they came with the Ottomans. But how could a people that came with the Ottomans give names to places? And they are quite telling. Toponyms like Zveti Arbana, meaning Zveti Arbanash, meaning the place of the Holy Albanian.
So basically, this is the theory of the Serbs that the Albanians came with the Turks, right? But
yes. When you ask them, they don't know. Sometimes they say Albanians came during the communist period. Sometimes they say they came during the Ottoman presence. Sometimes they say in 17th century. They between them they don't agree.
No. This is bullshit. So basically, to give a little bit of perspective, the capital of the Second Bulgarian Empire was called Veliko Trnovo, and there was quarters that were Albanian quarters, so Albanian merchants lived there that were called Arbanasi in Bulgaria, and Arbanas is from Arbanash, which is Albanian, right? So this is, I believe that this quarter is as old as at least 12th, 13th century. So this is predating the Ottoman invasion on the Balkans in any case, because I've heard any kind of bullshit Serbian story like the Albanians coming from the Caucasus region. This is anyway bullshit.
Anyway, I just wanted to underline with these Albanian place names, and settlements. They are recorded in Slavic and Ottoman registries alike during the 13th and 15th centuries. So the notion that Albanians are late migrants in this region is a false one, because as I said, that you have the Dardenian presence, and then you must also know that Štip, there is a city, I think it's in Macedonia. Štip and Niš are two cities whose name entered the Slavic languages via Proto-Albanian. So it means that a majority of Albanian speakers were living there when the Slavs migrated around the 6th century. And I want to add also that some churches like the Gračanica church is built on top of an older 6th century pre-Slavic church. So many of the churches you have in Kosovo were in fact built upon ancient churches that may very well have been churches of the Proto-Albanians living there. And the fact that you had Albanians living, or Proto-Albanians living in this region of Dardania up to the region of Niš means that you had Albanians living in Kosovo before the coming of the Slavs. So, this is something I guess the Serbs will cope to deny, but to fake toponyms is a very difficult thing to do. So even more so when you have it in medieval Serbian and Ottoman sources. So let's move on the other, how to say it, another side of the importance of Dardania for Albanians is the League of Prizren. Prizren is a city in the region of Kosovo, the province of Kosovo. And during the Ottoman Empire, this city was the cradle of the Albanian nationalism. The Albanians elite gathered there to defend Albania because, it was 19th century. It was the time of the treaties dividing the Ottoman Empire and giving some parts to Serbia and Greece. And the Albanians understood really quickly that they will be they would serve as a shield for the Turks, and that the Serbs and Greeks will very likely not be merciful to them. So they gathered to organize resistance. And I would like to quote the memorandum from the League of Prison that was sent to the British delegation of the Berlin Congress in 1878. I quote, just as we are not and do not want to be Turks, so we shall oppose with all our might anyone who would like to turn us into Slavs or Austrians or Greeks. We want to be Albanians, unquote. And this quote would fit today for the Albanian third position. We can say, just like our forefathers from the League of Prison, we do not want to be Turks or Middle Easterners, or to be or we don't want to our identity to be denied by globalist forces. We want to be Albanians and Europeans. I want to stress this out. And so this League of Prison was an important move for Albanians, because back at the time, Albanians were divided into 4 vilayets. Vilayets were like regions of the Ottoman Empire, and they were not recognized as a people because the Turkish administration linked people with its faith. And since Albanians had different faiths, they were not regarded as a people.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
a lot of people don't understand that the Ottoman Empire was basically a religious empire, Islamic empire. So they were separating people on the basis of faith. This is 100%.
Yes, and
yeah.
Here we can talk again about Serbia, because after the death of Prince Lazar, as I said, the Serbian resistance to the Ottoman Empire stopped, and then it was a collaboration. And the Serbian despot that I mentioned earlier, George Brankovic, he was filthy rich, and he was the vessel of the Ottoman Turks. And he made a deal with the Turks to, pay taxes, but the Serbian people would not be pressured by the Ottoman administration, that the Ottoman will deal with the Serbian Orthodox Church to not try to convert the Serbian people, etc., etc. And this was a good deal for the Turkish power, because, if everybody converts to Islam, they would have all the taxes they could take from the Christians. So, the fact that the Ottoman power made deals with the Orthodox Church of Serbia and Greece was a good thing for them, because Greece and Serbia were filthy rich at the time. It meant for the Ottoman Empire more income, whereas on the other hand, Albania was quite poor after all the wars of Kanderbeg. So the pressure was extreme in Albania, and since Albania had not a common religion like the Orthodox Serbs, it was easier for the Turks to prey on Albanians, and this can explain why you had so many Albanians that turned to Islam to avoid being pressured to death.
Yeah, the persecution.
Yeah.
By the way, there are a lot of things to be said about the Ottoman invasion of the Balkans and the Jews. Yeah, but this will be another show. Maybe I'll make. Maybe we can make a future show about the Ottoman invasion, because it will be quite interesting podcast.
Yes, it's a good idea.
Yeah, maybe with some of the Croatians. And I have a lot of things. Let's say that the Venetian Jews managed to infiltrate the Bulgarian royal house of Shishman. And the Jewess, Sarah, it's official history, it's not conspiracy history, something, managed to, so there are these myth that the last Bulgarian Tsar saw this beautiful girl taking a bath in the river. He fell in love. In reality, the Venice were pressuring. So basically, Venice and Bulgarian Empire were allied against the what is in English? Genoa, I suppose, Genoa, and this plus the interest of the Bulgarian Tsar led to marrying with the Venetian Jewess. And this caused a split in the empire, a lot of problems, and the last Bulgarian Tsar was Mishling. At least he was not a legitimate Tsar. There was in the northern Bulgaria, in the region of Moesia or Mysia, there was the legitimate Tsar Ivan Svetsimir. So basically, there was a lot of things with the Jews, and also the Turks used the Jews like infiltrators, like people that were giving them like spies. The Jews were giving informations. Also, they were poisoning the wells of some of the big fortresses. There are a lot of things to be said about in that regard. Yeah.
But
so
anyway,
Anyway,
to return to the League of President, I will just mention one of their actions. There is something called the action of Jakova, which is a town in Dardenia, and it was undertaken in 1878 by the Jakova Committee of the League of President. And during the battle, they killed Mehmet Ali Pasha, which was an Ottoman marshal of German origin. He was a German. He converted to Islam to serve in the Ottoman administration, and he was his mission was to take the Albanian lands and give them to Montenegro, and the Albanians of the League of President killed him and his Ottoman soldiers. So this is to underline the fact that even if many of the members of the League of President were themselves Muslims, they did not hesitate to kill other Muslims like the Ottoman soldiers or like this German convert named Mehmed Ali Pasha. So since the beginning, the Albanians expressed in their nationalism something that went beyond mere religious matters. They put the nation first, and in this attitude you can find a kind of pagan spirit, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
And continuing from this point, I'd like to highlight the fact that the Principality of Serbia focused on Kosovo after the annexion of Bosnia by Austro-Hungary. It was occupied in 1878 and annexed in 1908. And before that, they were focused on, taking Bosnia. And once the Austrians were there, they turned to Kosovo. And after the Balkan Wars, they managed to conquer Kosovo. And because of that, Kosovo remained outside of Albania. And from this point on, you would have this division between Albanians from Albania and Albanians in Kosovo, in which when you try to understand the history, the Serbs will say like, oh, they came with the Ottomans and so on and so forth. When in fact, since the Balkanic Wars, the Albanian asked the powers of the time to at least cut Kosovo in half, to have a Serbian part and an Albanian part. And Russians did not agree, French did not agree, Serbians did not agree, and 100 years after, they lose Kosovo and they cry and they don't understand why. The reason why is that these treaties did big harm to the Balkans. The boundaries were drawn in a disrespectful way for the people there. They disregarded the realities of the Balkans, and people after wonder why things are so messed up in the Balkans. Well, you don't have to search very long, and I would like to stress that when Serbia took control of Kosovo, they implemented a kind of official strategy, an official state program to reduce the Albanian presence in the Kosovo province, in Dardenia, and they sent Serbs to colonize Kosovo. And one of the main people proposing this idea in the 20th century was a guy named Vaso Kubrilovic. He would be Tito's personal advisor for a time, and he was linked with the secret ring that tried to kill the Austro-Hungarian prince Franz Ferdinand, which sparkled the First World War. So, because of Serbia, you had a major catastrophe of one of the biggest catastrophes in European history, which is the First World War. And if you are interested in history, you should read books by Léon de Grelle. Léon de Grelle was this Belgian hero from World War II. He had his fascist movement in Belgium, and he had wrote some history books about the origins of the First World War, and he underlines that behind the Serbian ring that tried to kill and that achieved this goal of killing the Austrian prince, there was Russian influence, because Russia wanted to expand, to destroy the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and to follow a politic of pan-Slavism.
Yes.
And many people mistake the origin of the First World War with pan-Germanism. Like Germany wanted to be bigger and so on. But this is bullshit. The war starting of the First World War was because of Russia and of its agents in the Balkans, which were the Serbs.
Yes.
And at least this Vaso Kubrilovic guy admitted it in the end of his life. He said, we destroyed an ancient, beautiful order that was a European order for foolish aims. So I must confess this, because from the First World War, you would have the Treaty of Versailles, which will destroy Europe in its traditional foundation, especially in Central Europe, but also Bulgaria suffered from the Treaty of Versailles. And we as Albanian nationalists, just like we suffered because of the treaties in 1912, 1913, of the great powers that didn't respect our rights to be united with Kosovo and so on, we feel just like those nations that were cut in half by the Treaty of Versailles. And if you don't protest against the Treaty of Versailles, you are doing nothing. The Treaty of Versailles is at the basis of all the things that went wrong in Europe.
Yes.
And still, And still, what happened in the Balkans afterwards, and etc., are all rooted in the Treaty of Versailles. And it's not a coincidence that in the Nuremberg trials, when the Germans were trying to explain their politics by saying, well, the Treaty of Versailles was unfair, this was not accepted by the judges. They say you cannot criticize the Treaty of Versailles.
I believe that basically the thing with the Balkan Wars is also very interesting too. It's just representing how the Russian politics is working. So maybe you know that the Balkan Wars were. I mean, I cannot speak about the Greek and the Serbs, but basically after the liberation of Bulgaria in 1878, there was an enormous part of ethnically populated Bulgarian lands, what was left from the Second Bulgarian Empire, what was left after the Ottoman invasion, of course. And these only a small part, like what is northern Bulgaria, was basically Bulgaria, called Princedom of Bulgaria. And Bulgaria started to work through different options to unify these Bulgarian ethnic clans that were historically Bulgarian for at least 1,000 years. And basically, the Serbs received the territories of Niš because they supported the Russians during the Russo-Turkish War of 1877-1878. So they received that, but there was still quite a large Bulgarian populations there, and they were under quite severe persecution, which is the typical Serbian operation. Like modus operandi is to start to prosecute people that they think that are not Serbs, and to try to convince them that they are really Serbs. This is part of the so-called megali idea, great idea, Velika Serbia. More or less in the same lines were the Bulgarians that were under Greek oppression. But in the Balkan Wars, so basically there was a lot of things happened before the Balkan Wars. Of course, there was a unification between the northern and southern Bulgaria in 1885. Of course, the Serbs that were backed by Austro-Hungary, interestingly enough, attacked Bulgaria in the back. They were soundly defeated, even though the Serbian army was numerically and technologically advanced for their time and quite strong. They were soundly defeated by the Bulgarian army, but the Austrians actually protected the Serbs back in the time. This is very.
You had the Serbians, which were allied with the Austro-Hungarians, and I think Bulgaria was allied with Russia.
No. Actually, in 1885, the Russians disavowed Bulgaria because the unification between the northern and southern Bulgaria was against the Russian interests.
Yes.
So basically, they actually was staunchly against the Bulgarian unification, and they actually created groups of conspirators against the Bulgarian prince at that time, Battenberg, and they basically managed to create a coup d'etat against him. He abdicated. Then he was restored to the throne, but then he decided to at the end to give the power because he understood that the Russians are against him. So the Russians basically were against Bulgaria in that period. They were backing the Balkan alliance between Serbia, Bulgaria, and Greece against Turkey, because this is fitting their narrative. but also Serbia and Greece were creating this secret agreement between them, because basically they've understood that Bulgarian army, even though the most numerous army and taking the heaviest casualties, cannot fight on two fronts. So because of the geographical situation of Bulgaria, basically we must fight on two fronts against the main powers of the Turks in front of Istanbul or Tsarigrad, whatever, and also in the front of in Macedonia. So basically, the main front was the main interest of the Bulgarian army to try to stop the coming of new Turkish. Of course, the Ottoman Empire was even in decline. It was a quite strong empire in
indeed.
century.
But this play of Russia in the region, that first they were more or less back in Bulgaria, and then when it didn't fit their narrative, they changed for Serbia. It's because they wanted to follow their pan-Slavic goals, and Bulgaria was not willing to play this part.
Yeah,
but
yes.
This part was agreed to be played by Serbia. So this explains as well the coup in the Serbian dynasty. I think it's the Karađorđević that were killed and replaced with the Obrenović, or was it in the other way around? I think it's in 1908 or something, in the beginning of the 20th century.
Well, okay, yeah. There was this change of dynasties there, but also I believe that in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, which a lot of people don't know, that Yugoslavia of Tito is one thing, in the Kingdom of Yugoslavia is another thing. But the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, they also ruled. I mean, the Karađorđević also ruled, and they had the same policy of oppressing everyone that is not basically Serb.
Yes. And you give me a perfect transition, because who was behind the creation of Yugoslavia in the Treaty of Versailles? It was the USA. So it's you have to remember that even the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was like a US sponsored creation. When you understand this, you understand even some other things that happened later in the region. But now I shall let my comrade Piero talk about this period of the Yugoslavia.
Yeah, basically I'll take things from here to the present day. Actually, I wanted to start by stressing out and confirming that what my friend said about the repressions that Serbs did to the population there, and name some massacres and genocides that Serbs did. Basically, what Serbs did throughout all their reign over Kosovo, even in Turkey, even in the Ottoman Empire, but even after that, so basically the last 100 years, they actually promoted Turkish culture in order for Albanians in Kosovo to go and migrate to Turkey. That was one of their strategies to get rid of the actual population in Kosovo and replace it with Serbians. That was one of their strategies. Yeah. Another thing that is important to mention, between the Yugoslavias that you mentioned. So basically, we have the Kingdom of Yugoslavia and the Yugoslavia, communist Yugoslavia. Basically, during this time, we have the Second World War, right? And in the Second World War, something happened for Albanians, like a dream come true after the 1913 Treaty of London. basically the territories of Albania in Dardania, so Kosovo, was reunited with Albania during the Italian regime after Italy invaded, like in quotation marks. Basically, it wasn't like an invasion. Actually, it was even Benito Mussolini refers to the Kingdom of Italy and Albania, but that's another story. The position of Kosovo and Albania during the Second World War was actually very favorable. There were like collaborators to some extent, not to some extent, but like they were like a fascist regime actually. We even had like an SS division, Alpine division, like it's the most known SS division of Albania, which is called the SS Kanderbeg. And yeah, you might have heard of that. And it's actually like it was formed in Kosovo, basically in Dukajin, and it was like the recruits were up to Tetovo, which is basically in today's Macedonia. But yeah, this division was like a pure Albanian division. Basically, as their symbols, they had like the SS symbol and the Skanderbeg emblem, and which is like his helmet, with his goat helmet, and they had his sword as well. The Germans that installed that created basically the SS division thought of introducing some religious like themed emblems in the costume, but actually Albanians denied that. They only wanted like pure Albanian symbols, not like religious related one. And they've even had like clashes with actual Serbian communists. They've basically captured a group of Serbian communists, because we should like stress out the fact that basically even after the Axis invaded Yugoslavia, and there were obviously some collaborationist government of Yugoslavia with the Axis, most of Serbian population, like especially Serbian population, were more inclined to communism rather than fascism. And there were many like communist groups that were crushed by the SS Skanderbeg division, and actually they even like had an operation called Draufgänger. In German it's translated Daredevil in English, but basically what this operation did is paralyzed all weapon supplies for Montenegro, and the clashes like were between 7,800 soldiers of the like Serbian soldiers against the 2,000. This time, like it was later in the war, so some of the actual personnel of the SS division like were gone because of lack of supplies, basically. But they were against like 7,800 troops, and they were all only 2,860. So basically less than half, and there was like 1,000 Albanian local militia that helped them. So basically the ratio was 2-1, and they actually managed to kill twice as they were killed. Basically the not twice, actually more. The Albanian casualties were around like 100, and the opposition casualties were like the Serb casualties were like 617 killed. So basically, yeah. And after the war, obviously, some borders were reset you might as well know that the communist government installed in Albania after the Second World War was financed by communist Yugoslavia, so their intentions weren't anywhere near like reuniting Kosovo with Albania. Even like the dictator of Albania, Enver Hoxha, he actually said that it was better off for Kosovo remaining a part of Yugoslavia than being a part of Albania. That's like absurd, because he thought like one of his explanations was that Yugoslavia was more like advanced than Albania, and that would be like profitable for Albanian for Albanians in Kosovo. Basically, that's like absurd. Anyway, so yeah, after the war, there was like a deputy prime minister after Tito. That was a Serb, actually. His name was Aleksandar Rankovic, and he was one of the main reasons that many Albanians fled to Turkey after all the propaganda that I mentioned a little while ago about like Turkish language and stuff like that. But he actually, like, during his time up to until 1963, all Albanian rebellions were crushed with the utmost force. His goals were Rankovic's goals were focused on centralizing the Yugoslav economy and power in Serbia. But since Tito was Croatian, as you might know, basically he dismissed this guy. And since then, the Albanian rebellions took place again, and were actually did some stuff. There were like schools and a university opening in Albanian language, and after many rebellions, actually up to 1974, when the Yugoslavia's constitution was actually changed. There was some amendments that put like some liberating factors for Albanians in Kosovo, and that kind of made their life easier. But still, in 1981, the one of the main rebellions peaked, which initially was like a student rebellions because of the poor food quality and the dormitories in the university. But that took like a larger scale, and after this rebellion, Serbs actually understood the threat of Albanians, like in their regime, and actually all that was done in 1974 constitution was ignored. So the Albanian rebellions like took more like a serious approach, and it wasn't up to 1994 where the Kosovo Liberation Army was founded, the 17th of November 1994, which was like an actual like military force that will be able to defend Albanians in Kosovo.
By the way,
Yeah.
by the way, it will be interesting for our Western listeners at some point to make a podcast about the Kosovo Liberation Army. Maybe not today.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want, but maybe today. I mean, I'm open for that, because recently we had a podcast about. It will be uploaded in the nearest future about the Turner Diaries, and a lot of the Westerners, they just don't have organizations that were that close to the resistant organizations on the Balkans. They don't have IMRO, they don't have Kosovo Liberation Army, they don't have Ustasha, and maybe it's a good idea to make some historical references about organization and
yeah. Basically, before the actual war began, there was like a period known as the Insurgency of Kosovo. Actually, the Serbs were dealing with the Bosnians and Herzegovina war and the Croatian war, as you know, up to 1995. So until then, like there were like continuous rebellions of Albanians in Kosovo. So as I said, this period was known as the insurgency, and there were actions like murdering of police personnel that were actually enforcing, were actually in the administration against like administration like controlled from Serbs and against Albanians. But yeah, I've actually have the three names that promoted openly, because up to 1997, so 3 years after the creation of the Kosovo Liberation Army, it wasn't actually known like publicly. And Daud Haradina, Recep Selimi, and Muj Krasniqi like promoted openly the existence of the Kosovo Liberation Army in the 28th of November 1997. This is a significant date for Albanians in general, because it's the Independence Day from the Ottoman Empire in 1912, and it coincides actually. And this like reaction from the Kosovo Liberation Army to come out openly was done because a teacher was murdered brutally from Serbs in a village. And yeah.
So basically what this means is that the core ideology of the KLA was not Marxist at all. I've heard Serbs saying that, oh, you know, the KLA, they were Marxist, in fact. Look at their flag. It's the Albanian flag plus yellow symbolism, like it's written UTK in yellow, because it's the yellow of the communist star and so on. So this is pure bullshit, because the ideology of the KLA was a pure Albanian nationalism. Their main reference was not Karl Marx or Enver Hoxha, it was Skanderbeg. And moreover, I should highlight the fact that all these wars in Yugoslavia are all rooted once again in the order that emerged from the Treaty of Versailles, and which was confirmed after the Second World War. And it was more than a war to, you know, to win independence. Of course it was, but it has also an ideological background, an ideological dimension. It was in fact a war against the order from Versailles, because the members of the KLA were in fact not so much fighting for an independence of Kosovo, but from total separation and a union with Albania. This was always the orientation of the Albanians from Kosovo.
Yeah, definitely. Here I have a declaration, the declaration when the Kosovo Liberation Army like came out openly in the public. If you want, I can read it. Like, it's not too
Yeah, yeah,
long.
yeah. Of course, of course.
So basically, on behalf of the Army for the Liberation of Kosovo, we express our sincere condolences and inform you that we share the pain with you. It's basically talking about the teacher that was brutally murdered in the village. The Albanian people in their own lands are prisoners in Kosovo. For years and decades have experienced on their shoulders the most inhuman oppression and violence by the Serbian occupiers. The best sons and daughters of our defenseless people were killed, imprisoned and massacred. One of these acts of violence on Serbian territory is the murder of our honored teacher, Halit Gecaj, from Lausha, and the barbaric murder of Ismet Gjocaj from Dechan. Murder, violence, discrimination, and terror has spread over this people by the Serbian occupier. He killed children, young people, teachers in schools, farmers in the fields. All that was in sight. Like, they killed all that was in sight. One day, the Kosovo Liberation Army was born from among these people as the only serious force for the realization of the ideals and aspirations of our people for national unity. In the ranks of this army are the best sons and daughters of the people, those who dedicated their lives to freedom. The KLA has been at the forefront of the war for the liberation of Kosovo for 4 years and has undertaken several liberation actions against the invaders in his most sensitive points, as well as against his Albanian-speaking collaborators, the collaborations. So basically, I'm gonna point out here that obviously there were still like communist Albanians that were collaborating, like traitors with Serbs. Actually, in early 1990s, when Albania first came, when communism fell, in like quotation marks, in Albania, because actually it hasn't fallen, because the actual leaders in Albania have lived in the period of communism, so you can make out like 2 + 2 that they're still the persons that lives through that era, like lead now. Anyway,
like in Bulgaria is the same, basically.
Yeah,
I call them
the same in the whole Balkan countries.
Yeah,
everything changed to remain the same.
Yes, yes. Basically, I call them crypto communists because they're pretending to be something different. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, in 1997 there was like a civil war in Albania, but that's another long topic. I'm not gonna go into that. And this was used like for beneficial purposes by the Kosovo Liberation Army, because huge army depots were at the army's disposal. But on the other hand, many of the weapons and actual like oil was sold from these democratic leaders that came into power in Albania, were sold to Serbia. So that's what the letter says, like referring to against the Albanian-speaking collaborators. To continue with the letter that like made the Kosovo Liberation Army known to the public. The fist of justice, the fist of force, the fist of the people will fall on them, on anyone who takes the courage to violate the ideals and signs of our people. Our holy war will continue until liberation, until our national unification. So basically, as we said, that was the main purpose, national unification.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Because let's debunk another of these propaganda topics of the Serbs. Were the Kosovo Liberation Army some kind of fanatical terrorist Islamist organization?
Yeah, that's a good thing you brought that up. Basically, they were actually offered help from jihadists, but they repeatedly rejected them.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, as happened to Bosnia, which actually accepted them,
Yes.
if the Kosovo Liberation Army would accept the help from the east, they would not get the help from the west. But that's another story. Anyway,
I should also highlight the fact that in Bosnia, the leader of the Bosnian movement was Ali Izetbegovic or something like this,
Yes.
and his political thought was rooted in the Islamic view. He wanted Sharia and so on. This is absolutely not not the case with the KLA. As we said, KLA was rooted in Albanian nationalism, not in Islam.
entirely on Albanian nationalism. I want to point out. I mean, we can talk about this a little bit more later, but it came up to my mind right now that there were many volunteers from all over Europe that fled from the Yugoslav wars in the early 1990s, when it came when it became known that there was an actual conflict between Kosovo and Serbia going on. So many families that were actually established all around Europe, so Switzerland, mainly Switzerland, Greece, Italy, and all over Europe came to Kosovo to fight for freedom. Actually, I've seen like recently a video of an 18-year-old girl, Albanian, that she said, I've come here to die. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know when we are going to win, but of one thing I'm certain, we are going to win. If you want, we can send that video to you. Continue with the letter. Our holy war will continue until liberation, until our national unification. One of our efforts against the enemy was the first daily battle in the villages of Drenica. Basically, that's when the wars started. There, the enemy had great material and human damage, so he was forced to retreat ashamed from the loss. Unable to stand up to our forces, they killed innocent people, shot at homes and schools. Basically, the thing with Serbians is that they were so frustrated by the losses that they targeted civilians. And yeah, we can mention a few of the massacres. The massacre of Meja, for example, where 377 were killed, Albanians, and their like tenacity in this case is that they took all of the bodies and buried them far away from where they were. In the Batajnica mass graves, you can see like there are like 744 corpses found of Albanians. So they actually among another interesting fact like to point out is they killed Orthodox, Catholics, and Muslims. So basically, what we should point out and we should like definitely mention is that this was not a religious war, as they say, like the jihadists and the orthodoxy of Serbs. Basically, there was an ethnic war, and Albanians as well have burned like Orthodox churches, but not Catholic ones, saying that there were like Catholics amongst the KLA ranks. So yeah, basically it's entirely debunked the fact that this was a religious war against the Turkish filth and stuff like that. We kind of covered that.
Yes, I would add something else about this. You know, if you listen to Serbs, they say, "Oh, the KLA, they were Islamic jihadists." But something interesting to highlight is the fact that the KLA members had little experience of the battlefield. And this can be surprising because you had a war in Bosnia, and like where was the Muslim solidarity between Albanians and Bosnians? It was nowhere. The Bosnian conflict didn't interest the Albanians because there was, beside the fact that both these people are Muslims, there were no ties. And you could think that, oh, so the Albanians could have go to Bosnia, fight against the Serbs then, and with this experience began a war against Serbia. But this was not the case. And I should mention as well the very well-known fact that why the KLA didn't trust any Mujahideen or Muslims is because in Kosovo, in the Kosovo province, it was very well known that there was an Islamic collaboration with the UBD. UBD was the secret services of Yugoslavia, and
UDBA,
there is
UDBA,
UDBA, and the Islamic leadership in Kosovo in the post-World War II, Rankovic was like a minister after the time of Tito. And this Islamic leadership collaborated with the Serbians to clean ethnically Kosovo from the Albanians. And so they were propaganding to deport Albanians to Turkey or anywhere else with the help of the Yugoslavian secret services. And this is why the KLA didn't tolerate any Islamic elements in among their ranks. And I should mention an example. In 1989, Ibrahim Rugova, the future president of Kosovo, attempted to place a bust of Peter Bogdani. Peter Bogdani was an Albanian Catholic priest that resisted against the Ottomans in the 17th century in Kosovo. And so he tried to place a bust of this historical figure to, as a symbol of Albanian nationalism. And this was opposed by the Islamic community of Kosovo, which was in fact working with the Yugoslavian secret services. And this was done on purpose to, prevent the rise of Albanian nationalism. And, this story, this fact that the Islamic clergy collaborated with the Yugoslavian secret services highlights once again that Muslims and Serbians go very well. They are very, very friendly to each other.
Yeah, I also will say, I mentioned before that Bulgarian intelligence actually made one of kind of help the Kosovo Albanians, because Bulgarian intelligence actually informed German intelligence about the Serbian preparations for massacre against the Albanians, the Operation Horseshoe. And again, I will mention that there was a struggle between the different elements in the Bulgarian government. As you mentioned, the communists were mostly in charge, but there was some pro-nationalist forces. And I remember when I was teen and I became more and more nationalistic, there was a very strong opinion amongst the nationalists to Bulgarian army to invade what is basically west. It's called Zapadny Pokrajina in Bulgaria, so it's basically the western border, so what is now eastern Serbia, and to get rid of the Serbs once and for all, and to pressure Skopje, because this is another topic that we didn't mention. But basically, the Bulgarian crypto-communist government was the first that recognized Skopje they also recognize the Croatian. To be honest, I believe one of the first that recognized Skopje, maybe one of the first that recognized Croatia, and the idea was that good relations with Macedonia, because of our basically coming from the idea that we are brotherly nations, they're the same like us, and so on. But it's not working because basically Macedonia is ruled by the agents of the Yugoslavian Secret Service, UDBA. And they're basically, even though that biologically, let's say, Bulgarians, spiritually they're Serbians. So that's why Bulgarian government is making a lot of helping the Macedonians, but actually I believe that the communists or the crypto communists, I must say, Bulgarian government actually are doing what the Russians asking from them. Basically, they saved the assets of the Serbs. This is what I mean. So, yeah. Go
so
on.
the last paragraph of the letter towards the public of the Kosovo Liberation Army. Brethren, many political parties and associations have appeared on our political scene, ostensibly speaking in the name of protecting the interests of the people. Some of them try to degrade our holy war with their pacifist attitude. We tell them enough because one day history will curse you. Let the blood of the fallen become a bridge that will unite us all around the Kosovo Liberation Army, to unite us all in the fight for the liberation of Kosovo, that only then our lands will see the light of freedom. Glory to those who have fallen for freedom. November 28, 1997. I mean, this may be one of the most nationalistic manifestations of the whole war. As you can see, they didn't care about any pacifist way. They actually wanted the territory back, whatever the cost, and they actually did that.
So once again, no mention in the letter of any communist reference, because I can assure you that if the KLA was communist, Marxist, they would have never fight the communist regime of Belgrade, of Yugoslavia at this time, because Albanian communists always collaborated with Yugoslavia first. And secondly, there in this letter you have, once again, no Islamic references. I didn't hear him say that to praise the martyrs for the Islamic faith or whatever. No, and even the mention of holy war, I bet it's in Albanian lufta e shenjtë, literally yes. Holy war instead of jihad or whatever.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with any of the Abrahamic religions. It's like holy as a concept of war. Like it's more pagan if you think about it. Anyway,
mentioning this pagan element of honor in war, this brings to my mind a recent book about by a KLA veteran about a Japanese volunteer in the KLA. You had a Japanese guy that went to Kosovo to fight with the Albanians, and he explained to his brothers of arms that taking part in this war will bring him lots of honor in his country. So, even a Japanese, which religion must be a pagan one, understood that his place in this war would be with the Albanians, because they were not fighting or pretending to fight for a religion. They were fighting for their blood and their soil.
Yeah, it's like a nationalist statement from what I've heard. It's not political. It's not political in a sense like defending some kind of
You know
political
this. Sorry to
ideology.
interrupt you. Yeah,
Yeah,
this letter was actually written by soldiers when they heard the news that the teacher was killed. So basically, the soldiers, like the bulk of the KLA wrote that. Like no politician wrote that. So that's important to mention. And yeah, after this public appearance in 1997, we've actually we have to mention one of the greatest heroes of the war and like inspirations for the upcoming events, Adem Yashari. Basically, his history revolves around like wars, because even his close related, like his family was related to rebellions throughout the whole Yugoslav occupation of Kosovo. And when it came to the fact that he was actually taking part in fighting for the freedom of Kosovo, he obviously was one of the first people that inspired like many other Albanians to fight. And actually he died where he was born, in Prekas. He was surrounded by Serbian forces, which actually aimed at him, especially because they knew that he had such an authority and he was like the main inspiration of the old Kosovo Liberation Army. So his murder was like a considerable victory for the Serbians.
What is interesting to say about Adem Yashari is that he was, surrounded by Serbian forces, and he didn't surrender. He fought until the end. And this warrior spirit is a very European one. You had this spirit. It's the same spirit of the Spartans. The ancient Spartans in facing the Persians. It's the same spirit that was animating, for example, Skanderbeg, like fighting almost alone against a big force of enemies. This is something very unique in the European spirit, to let oneself be surrounded by the enemy and to not bow down, to not surrender.
Yeah.
You have it even in the U.S. history with the Fort Alamo. It's something you can point of the European spirit. It's almost an archetype, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. Basically, 58 people were killed. Only his niece survived the besieged, like a fortress where they were hiding. Not hiding, I mean, yeah, the outpost, as may I say. And what actually, like, she says after being like the only survivor, actually, Besarda Yashari, Adem Yashari's niece, she claimed that the policeman had threatened her with a knife and ordered her to say that her uncle had killed everyone who wanted to surrender. Basically, this is a total like deformation of the actual thing. He just didn't surrender, just did as much as he could until like his last breath, obviously. Yeah, this was in late February 1998, early March, actually, 5th or 6th of March 1998, and from there was like the actual conflict begun. And but I mean, throughout this period, as I said, Albania had a civil war, and all the military equipment that was stored in depots in Albania where came out actually. And you'd say, what this has to do with the war in Kosovo? Basically, many Serbs soldiers went through the border. They even crossed the border to go to Albania. And an interesting fact is that a village in Albania, like near the border where the Serbians crossed, took up arms and fought against them, like without any order. Yeah, that's really an interesting fact. And
Yes,
obviously,
a very interesting fact, because we can link this attitude to what we were saying at the beginning of our discussion about the Albanian spirit and Albanian tradition. This is this way of defending your homeland without receiving orders. This kind of traditional organization in the mountains, where each clan has to defend its territory against any invasions. It's something that it's part of the strength of the Albanians
yeah,
to survive in
definitely.
harsh conditions and to be able to fight back when they are invaded by foreign forces.
Yeah. I did mention like Albanians burned different Orthodox churches, but not Catholic ones, because, as I said, this may be one of the reasons. A reason for this may be the fact that there were like Christians and Muslims alike ranked amongst the KLA. But anyway, we've gone past that. But one point that I wish to make about the churches being burnt is that they served as military depots for Serbs, and that's one reason why they were burned.
And this is, this is not just us inventing this, that there were that the churches were used as hideouts for weapons. This attitude was very common among communists, and even in France. If you study Second World War in France, you'll find that the communist resistance in France had this. It was used to hide weapons in churches. This is an interesting fact. And when I say communists in France, this attitude was the same in Serbia among the communists, which were the elite of the Yugoslavian state at the time of the war in Kosovo. Because Serbians like to portray this as a war between the Albanian invaders and the Serbian population, as a war again between the Middle Eastern Muslims and the Christian Europeans. But this is really far from the truth. The truth, as we said, is that the Albanian autochthon population, inspired by nationalism, was being colonized by Serbs, and their mission, therefore, was to get rid of them, to fight back and unite with Albania. That's it.
Yeah, like before NATO joined, I'd like to point out that most of the KLA equipment was how do you call it? Basically, they bought the equipment themselves. That's what I wanted to say. And another interesting fact is that before the war started, Slobodan Milosevic encountered Rothschild and actually said to them that Kosovo for us is like Jerusalem for you. And that's an interesting point. And another thing of the Milosevic propaganda to Serbs was that as Kosovo being the cradle of their culture, is it was obviously a duty of every Serb to deal with Kosovo, because all the roots of all problems in that Yugoslavia came from Kosovo. Yeah, that was one of his propaganda speeches. And the main battle that actually turned the war in our favor. I mean, it's not that we were losing the war in any certain point, but I mean, we were making constant gains in to some extent until the NATO forces arrived and actually bombed many military outposts in occupied by Serbians. But the main battle that was a turning point was the Battle of Košare, which was the main military outpost that Serbians had very near the border with Albania. And as soon as this military outpost was taken, the war came closely to an end. Like 2 months after 2 or 3 months after they took Košare, basically the war ended. And yeah, another national hero, Agim Ramadani, which actually came solely for the purpose of fighting and dying for his country. He was actually in Switzerland, and he became a commander eventually of the KLA and died fighting in the Battle of Košare. Yeah, basically that's more or less like an overview about the war. But what this has left us is today is actually the current leaders, as you call them, like crypto communists.
Yes.
They actually are pseudo nationalists. So basically, they claim that they love their country, and that was the case with Kosovo's recent leader, which is actually now, and he actually came with the promise that he would reunite Albania with Kosovo. Meanwhile, it is stated strictly in the Kosovo constitution that something of that sort is not possible. So he just lied and got over with it. I mean, yeah, that's kind of like saying a little about the current political situation. Another thing.
If you want this, the whole KLA war for nationalist purposes was taken out by the Albanian communists in Kosovo, that will not allow union with Albania, as well as how to express it, like, you know, all the Western nationalists, when the wars in Yugoslavia began, they sided with Croatia at first, because they say, oh, Croatia, they are nationalists and they are fighting against communist Yugoslavia. But when the war in Kosovo broke out, the nationalists in Western European countries sided with Serbia for some reason, and they were in fact tricked by this old communist trick, that is to use nationalism when they are in a bad position. You know, since the beginning of the Yugoslavian wars, the regime in Belgrade was the official regime with communism as an ideology, and they felt that they were losing, and they preferred to use nationalism to pretend that their goals in the war were good ones, like we are defending the integrity of the Yugoslavian nation against Albanian separatism and ultra nationalism, because at the time I think that very few Serbians were saying that the KLA was Islamic or whatever. They said it was terrorist, but like the English forces said the Irish resistance army was terrorist and so on. So this is an old communist trick to use nationalism for their own purposes. And this is what happened after the war in Kosovo.
Yeah, and another thing like to highlight is the fact that we obviously are not like we do not totally agree with Kosovo being independent. We can say that this was like the lesser evil, because rather than being the fact that the constitution even like denies it in a categoric way the union with Albania, like shows the fact that nationalism is suppressed in this case.
I believe that I can confirm most of the things that you said. First of all, communists, they're using nationalism like a cover. It's a relatively, because in reality, communism is not nationalistic. They're internationalists.
Yeah, exactly.
And they found out that nationalism being natural, instinctive, how to say, in the spirit of at least of the European people, they use nationalism to a large degree successfully during the Second World War, the so-called Отечественная война, the Russian, what will be the translation in English, the defense of the Fatherland War, something like that. So basically, Stalin used for the first time orthodoxy and the more traditional type of nationalism against the Germans, and it was successful, unfortunately. So basically the communists everywhere in the first wave, in the 40s and the 50s, especially in Bulgaria. My family was sent us by the communists because of they were Bulgarian chauvinist nationalists. So this was against the party line. Nationalism was against the party line. But when they tried to cover their asses, communists became nationalists. They became kosher nationalists. And the fact is that the Serbs are using the new wine that is most likely sent by Moscow. They're using orthodoxy and so-called the cover of conservatism. And they're presenting a national conflict or ethnic conflict, if you want, between Albanians and Serbs as some kind of almost a crusade and Serbs are presented like martyrs. This type of behavior is coined out by a Jew, by the way, which is not very surprising, called Noam Chomsky, and it's not only his book. I have it here in the enemy section of my bibliothèque. It's called, the book was called, wait a second, the Masters of the World, ? The Hidden Goals of the War on the Balkans. And a bunch of Jews, basically like Noam Chomsky, Michel Chossudovsky, Diana Johnstone, Samir Amin, Peter Gone, Marcel Cohen, almost all Predrag Simic, Serbian communist. They are all whining for the destruction of Yugoslavia and pretending that not the ethnic conflicts between the population of Yugoslavia brought the wars of Yugoslavia, but some kind of of course, you can argue that the great powers used the ethnic conflicts, but it's the first place Yugoslavia was artificial creation. It was the 70s multicultural globalist elite created Yugoslavia like experiment.
Yes, this is what I said with the Yugoslavia, the Kingdom of Yugoslavia being creation of the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah, and for the Bulgarian listeners, when he said Treaty of Versailles, nationalists, and this is quite funny, nationalists in Bulgaria that at the same time claiming that they're Orthodox nationalists, like they're supporting Orthodoxy, they're marching against Nyoy. Now, Nyoy, the Treaty of Nyoy, is basically part of the Treaty of Versailles. It's just signed in a different place. So basically, the people that are supporting Serbs cannot protest against the Treaty of Nyoy because Treaty of Nyoy is creating this artificial state of Yugoslavia. And one of the sides that is suffering the consequences is Bulgaria. The same for Croatians, the same for Albanians. So yeah, this is the thing with Orthodox nationalism and all this bullshit that is created by the think tanks in Moscow, most likely. And when said created by the think tanks of Moscow, I advise the listeners to look again in the Primakov doctrine, or I must say Finkelstein doctrine, named after the head he was basically foreign minister of the Russia and also agent of KGB. And most of the people, if they read the basis of the Primakov doctrine, will find that basically it's the Dugin. Alexander Dugin is the talking head of the Primakov doctrine. So yeah, go on. Just making references.
Just to underline once again the communist deception of using nationalism for their ends. This is exactly what Enver Hoxha in Albania did. He was like a hardcore communist, and when it suited him, he used some of Albanian traditions, some other Albanian traditions he destroyed on purpose because it didn't fit with his communist worldview, and he used Albanian nationalism to, he basically Albania was like the North Korea of Europe. Nobody could go out and nobody could come in. So when Serbs say that Albanians came from Albania during the time of Tito because Tito didn't like Serbs because he was Croatian, this is pure bullshit. I can assure you that if Albanians could leave Albania during the era of Enver Hoxha, they would have not stayed in Kosovo. They would have migrated en masse in other places like the US, Italy, or Germany, or whatever.
Yeah,
and this is
as far as
possible from Albania. Yes, and this is exactly what happened when the communism fell, as we mentioned earlier. But you have still some fools in Albania that think that Enver Hoxha was a real nationalist leader.
That's the problem with the current leader in Kosovo as well. They mistake him for a nationalist. Meanwhile, he's like a communist, basically.
Just like you have people nowadays mistaking North Korea for very nationalist place that
Yes.
don't really follow Marxism. They have their own style, and they're very nationalist. They oppose America and so on. But this with communism, it's better to be suspicious of them, especially when they pretend to be nationalist. And unfortunately, this is a trick that was applied on the Western nationalists, and today they are all in love with the Serbian struggle for Kosovo and so on, without without being aware that they are siding with communists, with communists that that are supporting the ancient order of the Versailles Treaty. Because once again, all the problems in the Western Balkans can be rooted in the Versailles Treaty. Really, if you don't include this in your worldview, you have no solution to offer to Europe.
I believe that the problem with a lot of the nationalists, they are not knowledgeable about history, or
Yes.
if they know something about history, is basically very shallow understanding of history. That's why when I started to make my podcast, I didn't expect to have a lot of followers, to have a lot of a lot. But I'm doing this anyway because
one of the problems with the nationalists in Europe is because they are kind of still rooted in the Abrahamic worldview.
Yes.
Because this is one of the strong points of Marxism in a way, or communism in a way, is but it's a kind of Abrahamic faith with a materialistic point of view. Like you have the chosen people, which in the Marxist worldview is the proles, the proletarian workers. You have the coming paradise, the heaven on earth that will be the state of communism. You have this internationalism that is present in both the Abrahamic faith and communism, Marxism. So because of this common DNA between the two, communists that use nationalism for their ends tend to trick very easily the Western nationalists.
Yes, actually, it's 100% true, because if you look deeper, even though communism presents itself like materialistic, atheistic doctrine, actually, communism represents a lot of occult Jewish views about the golden age, about the utopian type of equality, about
the persecuted chosen people, and so on and so forth. Yes.
Yeah. So that's I 100% agree with your points.
And so to sum it up, the Serbian communists at the time presented the war in Kosovo as the good Christian European Serbs fighting for their holy land of Kosovo against the invading Muslim Albanians. And when you have a closer look, you find that Serbs killed Catholic in the Maya massacre of 1999. Just to say it again, like 377 Catholic Albanians were killed. If you continue to look for infos, you will find that gypsies sided with the Serbs during the war.
Yeah.
This is a very little known fact among the Western nationalists, and you continue to search, and you find that in fact Albanians who didn't came lately. They were always present, and so you have this all this bullshit made up by communist Serbs to trash this war because Serbs, they, thanks to the Treaty of Versailles, uh, they they managed to create the Yugoslavia. They always benefited from the Allies, and I don't know, but as a Western nationalist, they suffered a lot because of the Allies. The Allies bombed every city because of the war against Germany. In fact, beyond the Second World War, Second World War was not beyond a mere conflict between countries. It was a conflict between worldviews, and in this conflict between worldviews, for many reasons, the Serbians and the Yugoslavian were always on the side of the Allies.
Yeah.
They were always on the side of a very problematic worldview that is still on this day creating troubles for the survival of the European people as a whole. So
Yeah, about that, I'd like to add that the current situation in our world and nationalism in our world is up to a point where I'm not saying we Albanians and Serbians should set our differences apart. We will never like forgive them for what they've done, but considering that things are going from bad to worse every single day, I mean, hell, even if you look at Serbian Prime Minister, I think he or whatever is LGBTQ. So basically, yeah. My point is, yeah, we Serbians should focus on these things first and themselves before Albanians and their bullshit, basically.
Interestingly enough, the only decent Serb that I found online for a very long period of time, most of them are just these pseudo-nationalistic spurgs that are mixing Bolshevism, Duginism, Orthodoxy, nationalism, or whatever, and they're creating all this bullshit, and anti-fascism. This is also important.
Yeah.
And the only decent Serb that I found online was he claimed that he's liberal, a Serb that was criticizing Duginism, and he was making criticism of one of the books of Dugin that was translated to Serbian. And he basically claimed that the Russians using which is obvious from outsider perspective, but obviously the Serbs don't understand it like that. He claims that the Russians are using, or he said the Russian Empire is using the Serbs for their imperialistic interests and using them as Mitchells, which is like that, basically. They're using their I don't know, undefined nationalism and national complexes to basically to be a tool for the Russian, or I must say Bolshevik imperial interests. So this is the only decent Serb that I found online.
Yeah, well, because of these treaties of Versailles, as I said, there was a weak point in Europe, and just like in the medieval era when the Ottomans came in the Balkans, because they were invited by the I think it was by the Byzantines, and then then they took control of the whole Balkanic peninsula, and every time it used to be, they are invited by some local lords which want to to fight back against another one. Like, for example, one Serbian noble named Thomas Preljubovic. He was the Serbian despot of Ioannina, and he asked for the help of the Ottomans to fight the Albanians that were harassing him in Epirus. And this guy is known for his cruelty against Albanians, but also against Bulgarians that were allied with Albanians in Epirus in the Middle Ages. So this guy turned to Turks, and he brought like 500 years of non-European domination in the Balkans. And in the same way, the treaties of Versailles, etc., by creating these future problems for Europe, invited non-European powers to come in the Balkans and call the shots from now on. People must be, like our listeners must be aware of this fact. Even the Serbians listeners, because, you know, as my comrade just said, for my advice for the Serbian listeners would be like, just not forget about Kosovo, because it will always be a theme in Serbian nationalism, I guess, but focus on the coming problems, the coming challenges for not only for Serbia, but for the whole European continent. Like we were mentioning before, if we look at the demographic, the majority of the population in Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania will be gypsy.
Yeah.
In like 20, 30 years. Like
short, in a short period of time, maybe 15 years.
Like what is the purpose of Serbia with a majority of gypsies and fighting for taking back Kosovo? You see, it's a nonsense. The situation.
Absolutely, but they're using this divine and emperor, this ancient doctrine. Yeah.
I know, but we, as my comrade just said, we will always have these differences between us, but sometimes you have to look at the wider picture. And, you know, a fight between an Albania full of gypsies and a Serbia full of gypsies for Kosovo is absolute nonsense.
I believe that this thing with the gypsies is created again, was foreseen by Moscow. I don't know what is the situation in Serbia with the gypsies or Romania, but I know that basically in 1941, in the census, I told you this already initially, that in the census 1941, in then Bulgaria, which including the ones of modern day North Macedonia, whatever, and Aegean Thrace, which is in Greece now, plus Western Serbia, it was 40,000 gypsies in a population around, I believe, 7 million, which is not great, but still it's much better than we have today. And during the time of communism, basically they had doctrine of importing gypsies from Romania and from Greece and Turkey. So basically the gypsies that are coming from Greece were actually Turkish gypsies. The idea, the genius ideas behind that was that basically they took the land, the communists took the land. There was they're fanatical Marxists, so you don't have a right to possess the land. And this caused basically Bulgarian population that was predominantly peasants, farmers, working the lands. These basically forced the population to come to the cities to create a proletariat, to work in the build factories. So they use this economical pressure. And then you have a land, and nobody wanted to work the land because there are not enough people there. So they started to import people that, according to them, will work the land, which are the gypsies. And they started to settle the gypsies, but the gypsies, they don't work. And the communist mind that don't have the communist against natural order, and they think that everything is equal. Cat is the same as a dog, and the dog is the same as a pig. So they thought that gypsies somehow, even though they are totally nomadic primitives, they will work. They didn't work, but they gave enormous amount of money and privileges to the gypsies, and this caused a boom in their population. Basically, I saw the data. They said that 750,000 gypsies in Bulgaria. No. They're at least 1 million, maybe more. So
yes, I told you it was the same in Albania. Like in Albania, you had the Albanian population, but you had also gypsies, Egyptians of the Balkans, and everything was, they were living apart. There was no mixing between them. They were like communities, distinct communities. But communism said, no, you gypsies and you Egyptians are Albanian like the others, and they give them, special treatment because races are not a real thing. We as communism are anti-racist.
I mean, if you feel yourself Albanian or Russian, you can be Albanian or Russian. Yeah, that's Duginism in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And nowadays, because of this very bright policy of communist Albanians, we have a lot of Albanian gypsies pretending to be Albanian and doing a very strange thing in many parts of Europe, bringing shame on the Albanian name. So once again, thank you, communism, for what you've done for Albania.
Actually, I will prove this thing because, as I said in the beginning, I didn't know how. I never had the experience in real life with Albanians. I didn't know a lot of Albanians. What is the dominant racial type in Albania? Dinaric, I believe.
I believe it's Dinaric.
Yes.
I had a French friend, and he came to Albania, and I met him, and he met my family, and he said to me, okay, I'm doing this ground tour of Albania, and then I come back to you. And then when he came back to me, he said to me, oh, in fact, your family is like a snapshot of the different racial types in Albania. He said to me, like, your father looks like a Mediterranean guy. Your mother is like blonde and blue haired, which is rare but not uncommon in Albania. Your sister is still blonde, but you can sense that she is like a generic, and you are like a mix between generic and Mediterranean. And this is like the racial map of Albania. This is the type of Albania. You have generic in the mountains and rather Mediterranean on the coast.
Yeah. I've noticed that. Actually, it's not so uncommon, the blonde people. I actually expected less percentage of blonde people, but I saw quite a lot, especially amongst the women. So yeah.
If the listeners are interested about the topic of the racial makeup of Albania, I can advise them the book from the American raciologist named Carlton Kuhn. He wrote a book about the racial makeup of northern Albania, I think. It's called the Land of the Giants. So it's a very detailed book with the color of the eyes, the color of the hairs, the height of the Albanians there, because the book is called The Land of the Giants because the northern Albanians are tall for most of them, and so I think you can find it for free and rather easily online. So go check it out.
Yeah, I mean, generic type is called Radato. I mean, this is, I believe, one of the tallest super races in Europe.
Yes.
So,
So
well,
to,
yeah. Go on.
before forgetting about this, I would like to stress for the Western listeners that instead of siding with the Serbs, because in Western Europe, one of the main topics is the Great Replacement.
Yes.
Countries like France, Germany, England are facing a flood of migrants from Africa or the Middle East, and this is going to change the racial structure of their countries forever. And many of them draw a parallel between this situation and the situation in Kosovo. They say, "Oh, look, you must look at Kosovo. In Kosovo, Albanians were like 2%, and then they became 90%. This is what is going to happen in France, in England, in Germany, with this kind of great replacement policies, etc." And so they side with the Serbs by solidarity, sympathy, whatever. But my advice for them is, if you think that the Albanians were 2% and then 90%, you are understanding nothing of what happened in Kosovo. Kosovo is not an example of a great replacement in a country. In fact, you should learn from the war in Kosovo, but in the other way around. You must learn that the Albanians were defending their blood and soil, that they were facing a hostile government that kept sending colonizers, foreign colonizers in Kosovo, in Dardenia. They were the Yugoslavian, the Serbian state helped these colonists to settle in Kosovo, and the Albanians, little by little, they made a secession. This is the Albanian method that the Western people of Europe should apply to get rid of their globalist government that keep sending them colonists, but from Africa and from the Middle East. The Kosovo War was already won before even the KLA writing the letter and coming into the public knowledge. In fact, in Kosovo, in the 1980s, a parallel society was built. The first step was reconciliation, a union between all the Albanians of Kosovo. Because of Albanian tradition, vendetta is a very important concept. But another concept also important is to be able to forgive and stop vendettas. And so the first step for many of the figures from Kosovo, from Dardenia, like Ibrahim Rugova or Anton Cheta, was to reconcile the Albanians and to unite them around a common flag, so the red and black flag of Albania. And thanks to this union, to these families forgiving one another and forgetting about the vendettas, this was the first, spiritual liberation. And without this, the KLA would have been not as successful, I believe, because everything starts with oneself. If you want to get rid of a bad situation, you must act first yourself. This is difficult to do, but you have to do it. And once this was done for the Albanians in Kosovo, they managed to create a parallel society with their own hospitals, their own, social welfare. They stopped paying their taxes to the government of Belgrade, which used their money to send colonists in Kosovo. And instead, what they did, they took, I think it was 3% of their wages and gave it to their own parallel government of Kosovo. And with this money, this parallel government created schools, parallel schools, universities, parallel economy, a complete parallel society. And this society, by the 1992, was virtually de facto independent from the central state of Belgrade. And after that, after this second step, the war and the success of the KLA was possible. And this strategy would be a good inspiration for the Western nationalists. Their states want to replace them, and they must understand that now the states, just like our communist states that give Bulgarian or Romanian or Albanian nationality to gypsies and Egyptians that never cared about the nationalities of the countries they were in, that were and still are utter parasites. The Western states are doing the same, like France gives its nationality to Africans, to Arabs or whatever. So this state is obviously against the people, the autochthonous people of France, of England, of Germany, etc. And you can even see it in, the crimes committed in these countries. Like, for example, in England, you have people from Pakistan raping young girls. In Germany, it's the same thing. In Sweden, it's the same thing. And they are not condemned. They are not. There is no trial, or they don't go to jail for the rest of their life. And on the other hand, the autochthonous population is pressured by taxes. If they do something wrong, they go in jail and they are fined heavily. So the only solution for the people of Western Europe is to follow the Albanian example of secession, of creating a separate, a parallel society. Sorry.
Absolutely.
And the war of Kosovo can be an inspiration. That instead of looking at the Serbian side of the story, they should focus on the Albanian side. The Albanian side has everything. It has autochthonous people fighting for its land, creating a parallel society because the central state is not their friend, and so on and so on.
Absolutely. By the way, the thing that was preserved in the mountains of Albania is a very ancient type of worldview, and that's why, even though I know that the Western and Northern Europeans looking down upon us, but they could learn things from the people on the Balkans. I mean, the thing is that our ancestors fought the invaders of all kinds, sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully. But there is not a precedent in the history of the Balkan people that we invited the racial aliens and these people in Sweden, in France, they are welcoming these people that will replace them and destroy the European culture. And gene pool, of course. So this is mind blowing for me. It's just unreal.
Yes. It's unbelievable, and it's a threat in the long run for the whole European continent.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would say that Albanians managed to create parallel societies because you have patriarchal clan structure that must be restored, because basically almost all other European countries this thing was lost.
Yes. It's not a coincidence that the globalists aim at the family. They aim family to destroy it, because family is the basis of society, and the Albanian society always revolve around the family. May it be the small family, like father, mother, and the children, or the family in the meaning of a clan. And once again, this vision of a family as a clan that must take revenge when it's wronged and so on, it's rooted in paganism, not in the Abrahamic faith. The Abrahamic faith tend to, highlight the individual side, like you must save yourself, you must go to heaven, but don't care about your mother, your father, or the important part is the individual. Whereas in the paganism, your honor is tied to the honor of your family, of your clan, and so on. So, this is something harder to destroy. And in the Albanian society, in the Albanian culture, the Albanian tradition, this is a very important point.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's also it's kind of strange that they're denying the Abrahamic religions. They're denying the material world, supposedly, but most of the things that they're doing are heavily materialistic. It's very it's full of contradictions, like most of the things that are coming from the Jews. Yeah,
full of paradoxes. Yes.
Yes.
But to add something about the topic of Kosovo, I said that the Western nationalists should take inspiration from the Albanians instead of taking inspiration from the Serbians, because in the end the Serbian story is we are the victims, and playing the victim, it's not a good state of mind. You know what I mean. It's something to be avoided. It's better to have a model that managed something, that managed to create, for example, a parallel society. But anyway, I have now some hope in the. I have some hope in this thing changing, because in Ukraine you have a conflict that can remind the war in Kosovo. You have the Ukrainians fighting in Crimea, I think, and in Donbass. And I would like to take this occasion to salute our Ukrainian comrades from the movement called Avant-Garde, because they displayed an Albanian flag as a sign of respect for the Albanian third position during one of their festivals held during the Day of the Defenders of Ukraine. It was sometimes like some days ago, and this was a sign of respect for the Albanian third position and for the Albanian struggle in Kosovo, because they were the Albanian flag and the Ukrainian flag, symbolizing like two different flags, but one struggle for blood and soil. And things change because we had in a podcast from another Ukrainian movement called Centuria, I think. A member of this movement, I think, mentioned that when he was young, he was pro-Serb at first during the Kosovo War, and he went to Kosovo to join Serbs. And when the conflict between Russia and Ukraine broke out, he witnessed the Serbians rally with the Russians and arresting him, I think, in some part of Ukraine. And he was really, really disappointed with this attitude because he had joined the Serbian forces to fight against the KLA in Kosovo. And now there is this situation where the Serbs are supporting, a separatist movement in Ukraine, while they cry all day long about the respect of international laws and so on. And so he told the guy in the podcast that he had this Kosovo je Serbie T-shirt, and since the war in Ukraine, he has put this T-shirt in the toilets because he understood that this is just propaganda, that this is just a way to deform the reality. And
so basically, I'd say that sooner or later, like all nationalists will understand the true face of Serbia. They can't hide. Every time behind their laptops and PCs writing propaganda against Albanians and hope to get away with it. Basically, as my comrade mentioned, people now are starting to see their true face.
I think that some of the propaganda is coming not from Serbia directly, but from Moscow.
The propaganda coming from Moscow is in fact a burden for the Serbs because they said, oh no, there are some countries recognizing Kosovo, but this cannot be because of the international law and blah blah blah. But Russia did exactly the same.
Yes.
In Abkhazia and Ossetia, and the Serbs don't know how to react to this because if they recognize Ossetia and Abkhazia, this means that they should recognize as well Kosovo. But Russia is supposed to be their closest ally, so doing something like this is like it's like betraying the Serbs. So they are in a very, very bad position.
What is their position on Crimea?
Of the Serbs?
Yeah.
I guess the Serbian state does not recognize the Republic of Donbass or whatever, but I believe that the Serbian nationalists side with Russia.
Yeah, I know that they sided with Russia. I believe that there was several units of Serbs fighting on the sides of the Novorussia.
So, yeah, by the way, I forgot to mention, basically one Russian was killed during the Kosovo War, and the KLA used this to prove that the Russian were involved in the conflict as well, but they actually denied this, saying that he was a volunteer, not that he was sent by the government there.
Very fishy because the Russians are using this tactic since the time immemorial. They are denying, they're denying their direct intervening in affairs of other countries. Yeah. So that's why I was asking about Russian mercenaries, because I know that Russian mercenaries fought against the Croats and against the Bosniaks. So it is very logical. Not to mention that there was a subject with Russian mercenaries on Macedonian territory in the early 2000s, but I just don't remember they were caught or there was a subject. There was something there. Just maybe in the future I'll manage to find some of the article about that. So yeah, definitely they're intervening, especially. My suggestion is, again, I will repeat that they're preparing something on the Balkans in the nearest future. So yeah.
So I think we're
done.
We finished here. We're done. Do you have anything to say to conclude?
But for me, it is a very interesting topic. I mean, I know some things like a general history of the Balkans, but not in details, and that's why I was always interested in the people that know details about history of Croatia or Albania. It was, for me, it's very pleasurable. And also, I hope that we will continue in the next podcast about, as I said, ancient history, about Macedonia. We didn't mention many things about Macedonia. It will be interesting to talk about Macedonia in the future. I suppose that there will be a lot of things to be said there. And I thank you for the podcast, and
Thank you as well for the opportunity to
Yes,
express
thanks
ourselves.
for having us on.
For me, it's pleasure, honestly. And have victory.
Rough tutorial.
May the gods help us in our struggle.